Roman soldiers were not just men with shields. They were the walking engine of an empire, carrying Rome across mountains, deserts, forests, rivers, and battlefields. Before Rome became marble, law, roads, aqueducts, emperors, and ruins, it was carried by tired men in armor, marching under heavy packs, building camps before sleep, obeying orders in fear, and standing together while the ancient world pressed against them. To understand the Roman soldier, we must begin before the empire was fully formed, before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before its legions became symbols of discipline and conquest. We must begin with a smaller Rome, a harder Rome, a city of farmers, households, fathers, sons, fields, cattle, gods, grave, and sudden war. In the beginning, Rome was not yet the empire remembered by history. It was a city among other cities, one community in a crowded Italian world of rival peoples, hill towns, alliances, raids, treaties, grudges, and old fears. The people who lived there were not born into certainty. They lived close to the land, they knew the rhythm of planting and harvest, they knew that a bad season could bring hunger, they knew that a nearby enemy could threaten fields, families, and honor. War was not distant from ordinary life. It could arrive as a call from the city. A man who had worked the soil might be expected to take up arms. A father might leave a household. A son might march beside neighbors. A small farmer might become a soldier not because he dreamed of empire, but because the city demanded service, and because survival in the ancient world often depended on whether men could gather, arm themselves, and stand together. The first Roman soldier was not yet the professional legionary of later centuries. He was closer to a citizen under obligation, a man whose identity was tied to land, family, duty, and military service. In early Rome, to be part of the community meant sharing its dangers. The city did not defend itself through a distant professional army. It defended itself through men who could be called from civilian life into war. This created a powerful bond between citizenship and the sword. A Roman was not only someone who lived under Roman law. He was someone expected to help protect the Roman world. Military service became part of civic identity. Duty to the city, duty to the family, duty to the ancestors, duty to the gods, and duty to comrades slowly braided together into something that would later become one of Rome's greatest strengths. But at the beginning it was not grand, it was local, it was muddy, it was dangerous. A man might leave his field not knowing whether he would return in time for the harvest. He might fight not for distant provinces or imperial glory, but for nearby land, disputed territory, revenge, cattle, pride, or survival. He might know the faces of the men beside him because they came from the same neighborhood, the same district, the same social world. The early Roman army was not yet a vast machine. It was a community under arms. This matters because Rome's later greatness did not appear from nowhere. It grew from habits learned early: discipline, service, endurance, order, and the belief that the individual body belonged, at least in part, to the survival of the larger community. The Roman soldier was made from that belief, not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly, generation after generation. Rome's early wars taught it lessons that would shape its future. The city learned that courage mattered, but courage alone was not enough. A brave group of men could still be defeated by disorder. Strength mattered, but strength without organization could collapse. Weapons mattered, but weapons in the hands of men who could not obey together were only metal. The ancient battlefield was terrifying because it tested not only the body, but the ability of men to remain a group while fear tried to turn each one inward. This was the secret Rome kept refining. The soldier had to become more than himself. He had to become part of a line, part of a unit, part of a formation, part of a command, part of something larger than his own panic. A single man could run, a disciplined line could hold, a single man could be overwhelmed by fear. A trained group could borrow courage from one another. A single man could break under pressure. A unit could survive because each soldier knew that the man beside him depended on his steadiness. The Roman soldier's strength was never only individual bravery. It was shared discipline. In this quiet journey through Roman military life, we will follow the soldier from the early citizen armies to the great legions, from recruitment and training to marching camps, from battlefield fear to life on the frontiers, from loyalty and punishment to the long memory of Rome's military machine. And if these calm walks through the past help you relax, you can stay with this channel as we continue building a quiet library of empires, soldiers, cities, rulers, and forgotten worlds. For now, let the present grow distant and walk slowly into the world that shaped the men who carried Rome. The early Roman world was built around obligation. A man did not exist alone. He belonged to a household, a family line, a social rank, a district, a city, and a sacred order of duties. The household had its gods, the family had its memory, the city had its rituals, the ancestors watched from the past. Honor mattered because reputations survived longer than breath. In such a world, military service was not only practical, it was moral. To fight for Rome was to prove that one was part of Rome. To endure hardship was to show worth. To stand in the line was to honor the family and the city. To run from danger could bring shame not only on the individual, but on the name he carried. This pressure could be harsh. It could demand more than ordinary men wished to give. But it also created deep seriousness. The Roman soldier was not imagined as a wandering warrior seeking personal adventure. He was bound to order, duty, discipline, and the judgment of others. Rome loved stories of stern virtue, the father who placed the city above his own son, the commander who punished disobedience even when it came with bravery, the soldier who endured hunger and wounds without complaint, the citizen who returned to his farm after victory rather than drowning in luxury. These stories were often idealized. Real Romans were not always so noble. They could be ambitious, cruel, frightened, greedy, exhausted, and divided. But ideals matter because they show what a society wanted to believe about itself. Rome wanted to believe that its strength came from discipline over softness, duty over comfort, endurance over panic, and public service over private weakness. The soldier became the body through which these ideals could be tested. A senator could speak about courage, a poet could praise old virtue, a father could teach discipline in the household, but the soldier had to carry it into mud, heat, dust, wounds, and fear. This is why Roman military history cannot be separated from Roman moral history. The legion was not only an army, it was a school of Roman identity. It taught men how to obey, how to endure, how to move as one, how to build, how to punish, how to survive, and how to think of themselves as part of something older and larger than their own lives. At first, Rome fought its neighbors, then it fought larger enemies. Each struggle changed the city. War brought land, land brought wealth, wealth brought rivalry, rivalry brought more war, defeated enemies became allies, subjects, or sources of manpower. Roads were built, colonies were founded, treaties were made. Military service expanded Rome's reach, but Rome's reach also demanded more military service. The system fed itself. A city that won wars gained more territory to defend. More territory required more soldiers required more organization. More organization made future conquest possible. And with each cycle, Rome became less like a city defending itself and more like a power learning how to command other peoples. The soldier stood at the center of this transformation. He was the one who marched, the one who dug, the one who guarded roads, the one who built camps, the one who faced ambush, the one who held the shield line, the one who froze on the frontier. The one who carried orders into places where Roman law had not yet become familiar. In later centuries, people would look at Rome and see monuments, but monuments are the still remains of movement. Before a province could have a Roman road, soldiers often had to secure the land. Before a city could receive Roman law, armies had to impose Roman power. Before an emperor could claim peace, generations of soldiers had made war. The peace of Rome was carried by men who knew violence. That is one of the deepest contradictions of the Roman world. Its order, roads, trade, citizenship, and urban life was supported by military force. The soldier did not only defend civilization, he also expanded it, often brutally. He could protect one community while destroying another. He could build a bridge in the morning and burn a village later. He could be disciplined, loyal, and hardworking while serving a system that conquered, enslaved, taxed, and transformed other peoples. The Roman soldier is therefore not a simple hero. He is not only a villain either, he is a human being inside an imperial machine. Some joined because they had to, some joined for pay, some for land, some for citizenship, some for survival, some for ambition, some because there were few other paths. Some because Rome had taught them that military service was the road to honor. Some because the army offered food, structure, and belonging in a hard world. The reasons changed over time. Early citizen soldiers were different from later professional legionaries. A man defending early Rome was not the same as a long-service soldier stationed on the Rhine, the Danube, the Euphrates, or in Britain. The Roman army evolved across centuries. Its equipment changed, its recruitment changed, its command structure changed, its enemies changed, its relationship with politics changed. But one thing remained: the soldier's body carried Rome's ambitions into the real world. The state could command, the generals could plan, the Senate could debate, the emperor could promise glory. But the soldier had to walk. Walking is one of the most underrated facts in history. Empires are often imagined through maps, colored borders, arrows, and dates, but the lived reality of expansion was movement by foot. The Roman soldier marched through dust that entered his mouth and eyes. He climbed hills with weight on his shoulders. He crossed rivers with wet clothing and cold legs. He moved through forests where enemies might be hidden. He slept on ground that was not home. He woke before dawn. He packed, lifted, formed, and continued. The empire moved at the speed of men walking. A Roman soldier could carry weapons, armor, tools, food, personal items, stakes for camp defenses, and the invisible weight of discipline. His life was shaped by burden. The shield was burden. The helmet was burden. The pack was burden. The orders were burden. The memory of home was burden. The knowledge that punishment could come from his own officers as well as danger from the enemy was burden. And yet through this burden Rome became mobile. The soldier was not only a fighter, he was a laborer of empire. He built roads, fortifications, walls, ditches, camps, bridges, and siege works. He learned to use tools as well as weapons. He could turn a landscape into a temporary Roman space by building a camp with astonishing regularity. At the end of a march, when a tired man might most want to collapse, the Roman soldier often had more work to do. He dug, he carried, he cut. He raised defenses. He made order before sleep. This habit was one of Rome's great military strengths. The camp was not just a place to rest, it was a statement of control. Even in enemy territory, Rome tried to build a small version of itself each night, measured, defended, organized, guarded, and ordered. The camp told the soldier where he belonged. It told the unit where to stand. It told the enemy that Roman discipline did not end when the march ended. Imagine the end of a long day, the sun lowering behind hills, armor heavy with sweat, feet aching inside worn sandals, shoulders marked by straps, men hungry, thirsty, irritated, silent. And then the order comes, not to sleep, to build. The ditch must be dug, the rampart must rise, the tents must be arranged, the watches must be assigned. The standards must be placed. The camp must become a guarded square of Roman order before darkness fully settles. This is not the glamorous image of ancient war, but it is closer to the truth. Rome conquered not only because its soldiers could fight, but because they could do exhausting ordinary work under military discipline. The battle might decide a day. The camp decided whether the army survived many days. The road decided whether supplies arrived. The bridge decided whether the army could cross. The ditch decided whether a night attack failed. The habit of labor protected the habit of victory. The Roman soldier lived between sword and shovel. That simple image tells us much. A man could not be only brave. He had to be useful. He had to obey when tired. He had to build when afraid. He had to maintain equipment. He had to march at the pace of the unit. He had to accept that his body belonged to a rhythm larger than his own comfort. This rhythm was enforced through discipline. Roman discipline was famous and sometimes brutal. The army depended on obedience because disorder could destroy it. Punishment could be severe for desertion, cowardice, mutiny, theft, or failure in duty. Rewards existed too: pay, honors, decorations, promotions, spoils, citizenship in some cases, and the respect of comrades. But the shadow of punishment was always near. The soldier feared the enemy, but he also feared his own command. That fear helped hold the army together, though at human cost. A man in the line had to know that breaking could bring shame and punishment. A guard on watch had to know that sleeping could endanger everyone. A unit had to know that disobedience might be met not with gentle correction, but with harsh example. Rome believed that fear could be organized into discipline. This may sound cold because it was, but ancient armies often operated under severe pressure. A single weak point could expose many. A sleeping sentry could invite massacre. A panicked man could create panic in others. Commanders believed harshness preserved the whole. Whether we judge that as necessary, cruel, or both, the soldier lived under its reality. He was surrounded by dangers from every side: enemy weapons, disease, hunger, weather, exhaustion. Punishment, homesickness, bad leadership, long service, and the slow erosion of the self that can happen when a man spends years obeying orders far from the life he once knew. This is why the Roman soldier must be seen as human, not only as a figure in formation. Behind every shield was a private world. A man remembered a mother, a father, a wife, a child, a field, a town, a debt, a promise, a god, a fear. He may have joined young and aged quickly. He may have laughed with comrades around a fire. He may have hated the march but trusted the men beside him. He may have seen places no one in his family had imagined. He may have learned foreign words, eaten strange food, feared unfamiliar forests, or stared at cold northern rivers wondering how far Rome expected him to go. The empire expanded, and the soldiers in a map expanded with it. A man born near the Mediterranean might find himself in damp Britain, watching mist rise over unfamiliar hills. Another might stand under the hot sky of Syria or Egypt. Another might guard the Rhine, listening to the sounds beyond the frontier. Another might march through the Balkans, across rough roads and mountain passes. The Roman soldier encountered the empire not as a map, but as weather, terrain, language, and distance. Distance changes people. A recruit who leaves home for the army may begin with one idea of Rome. After years of marching, he may carry a different one. Rome becomes not only the city, but the standard, the camp, the pay chest, the commander's voice, the road underfoot, the oath sworn with other men, the punishment feared, the victory remembered, the grave of a comrade beside a frontier road. The soldier's Rome was portable. Where the legion camped, Rome appeared, not fully, not peacefully, not gently, but visibly, a line of tents. A ditch, a rampart, a standard, a command structure, a language of order, a place for the commander, a place for the men, a schedule, a watch, a boundary between inside and outside. For a tired soldier, this portable Rome may have been both comfort and prison. The camp protected him, but it also controlled him. The unit gave him belonging, but it also consumed him. The army gave him pay, identity, and future hope, but it took years of his body. This is another central contradiction. The Roman army could give a man a life. It could also use that life until little remained. For many soldiers, service was long. In the professional army of the empire, men could spend many years under the standards. A recruit might enter young and leave middle-aged if he survived. The army shaped his posture, habits, friendships, skills, beliefs, and expectations. Civilian life after service could be difficult. Some veterans received land or settlement opportunities, some remained close to military communities. Some became part of the Roman presence in provinces far from their birthplaces. The soldier did not only conquer provinces, he helped Romanize them. Veterans settled, camps became towns, roads connected markets. Military zones attracted traders, families, craftspeople, and local exchange. Around forts and camps, communities grew. The soldier's presence changed the landscape even when no battle was being fought. This is part of Rome's deeper power. Its army did not simply arrive, fight, and vanish. It stayed, it built, it guarded, it spent money. It married or formed relationships, officially or unofficially depending on period and law. It created demand for goods. It brought Roman customs, language, coins, tools, gods, and habits. The frontier was not only a line of defense, it was a zone of contact. The soldier lived in that contact. He was changed by local worlds, and local worlds were changed by him. This slow exchange is quieter than battle, but historically enormous. Rome spread not only through conquest, but through the repeated daily presence of soldiers in places where Roman authority had to become ordinary. The army made empire visible in routine: patrols, taxes, roads, construction, trade protection, recruitment, and the constant reminder that Rome had men under arms. Yet all of this began from simpler roots. A city of farmers learning to fight, a community discovering that discipline could defeat disorder, a people whose military habits hardened through danger, a society that tied citizenship to service and honor to endurance. The later legionary with his shield, helmet, armor, and heavy pack was the heir of that old world. He carried not only equipment but centuries of Roman expectation. He was expected to be tougher than comfort, quieter than fear, more obedient than desire, more loyal to the unit than to panic. He was expected to march, dig, build, fight, and endure. Whether he always lived up to that ideal is another matter. No army is made of ideals alone. Roman soldiers complained, they mutinied, they deserted, they drank, they gambled. They formed loyalties to generals over the state. They suffered boredom, they feared death. They sometimes abused civilians, they sometimes showed astonishing courage. They were human, and because they were human, the Roman military machine required constant pressure to keep them in shape. Discipline was not proof that Roman soldiers had no fear. It was proof that Rome knew fear had to be managed. The early story of the Roman soldier, then, is not the story of an invincible man. It is the story of an ordinary human body being drawn into an extraordinary system of duty, repetition, punishment, and belonging. It is the story of Rome learning how to turn men into units, units into armies, armies into conquest, and conquest into empire. But the cost was carried one man at a time: a blistered foot, a sore shoulder, a hand gripping a shield, a stomach tightened before battle, a voice shouting an order, a night watch in cold rain, a grave beside a road, a veteran's scar, a recruit's first march. These are the small pieces from which the Roman world was built. As we move deeper into the soldier's life, we will follow the path from recruitment into training, from the oath into the camp, from the burden of equipment into the rhythm of the march. We will see how Rome made soldiers, how soldiers made Rome, and how the human body became the foundation beneath one of history's most powerful empires. For now, we leave early Rome at the edge of its future. The city is still becoming itself. The farms still lie close to war. The citizen still hears the call to serve. The soldier is not yet the famous legionary of imperial monuments. But the pattern has begun. A man leaves home, he takes up arms, he stands beside others, he learns that fear is easier to bear when the line holds, and somewhere inside that simple act the future empire begins to march. And as it marched, Rome learned how to make a soldier. At first, that making was seasonal, local, and tied to the citizen's place in the community. A man was called because the city needed him. He brought with him not only his body, but his status, his property, his family name, and the expectations of the class into which he had been born. In the older Roman world, military service was connected to what a man owned, because what he owned shaped what equipment he could provide and where he stood in the army's order. The army reflected society. Those with more property could afford better arms. Those with less had fewer resources. The battlefield was not separate from the structure of the city. Rank, wealth, duty, and danger were tied together. Rome did not yet have the fully standardized soldier of the later empire, equipped by a vast military system and bound to decades of professional service. It had citizens whose place in war reflected their place in the civic body. But war changed Rome. The more Rome fought, the more it learned that older ways had limits. Italy was not an easy land to master. It was full of hills, mountains, valleys, fortified towns, rough tracks, stubborn peoples, and enemies who did not always fight in ways Rome expected. The Romans had to adapt because survival required adaptation. They learned from enemies, they learned from defeat, they learned from terrain, they learned that rigid habits could break when the world became complicated. This is one of Rome's greatest strengths and one of the reasons its army became so effective. Rome could be proud, harsh, and stubborn, but it could also learn. It could lose a battle and change the way it fought. It could meet an enemy with different weapons and eventually absorb what worked. It could reshape its formations, equipment, alliances, recruitment, and command structures over generations. The Roman soldier was not born perfect. He was adjusted by history. Early Roman forces were influenced by the military customs around them. Over time, Rome moved toward more flexible formations that helped soldiers fight across Italy's difficult ground. Instead of imagining the Roman army as one unchanging machine, it is better to see it as a living institution, slowly hardening and reshaping itself as Rome's enemies became stronger and its ambitions grew wider. The soldier's experience changed with this process. He was still a man under command, still part of a community, still expected to endure fear. But the army around him became more organized. Units became more clearly structured. Officers carried more defined responsibilities. Standards, formations, camps, equipment, and routines became part of a military culture that could be repeated again and again. Repetition made Rome dangerous. A single army might win one campaign. A repeatable system could win for centuries. This was the Roman genius, not merely brave men, but a way of making bravery useful. The soldier had to fit inside a structure that could survive the death of individual men. A commander might fall, a recruit might panic, a veteran might die. But the system continued if the unit held, if the standards remained, if commands were understood, if discipline returned order after shock. A Roman soldier learned that he was replaceable and necessary at the same time. Replaceable because the army was larger than him. Necessary because if enough men like him failed, the whole line could break. This tension shaped the military mind. The soldier mattered most when he stopped thinking only as an individual. He carried his own fear, but he was expected to act through shared order. He could not decide alone when to advance, when to retreat, when to throw, when to hold, when to dig, when to rest. His body became part of a collective rhythm. Training existed to make that rhythm natural. A new recruit did not simply receive a sword and become Roman strength. He had to be shaped. He had to learn how to stand, march, carry, obey, strike, build, and endure. He had to become used to the weight of equipment and the sound of command. He had to learn that his discomfort did not matter as much as the movement of the unit. He had to absorb the harsh truth that the army would ask the body to continue long after the body wished to stop. The first transformation was mental. A recruit entered with habits from civilian life. He may have known farming, trade, family work, hunger, and ordinary hardship, but military life imposed a different order. Time belonged to command. Movement belonged to command. Food, rest, sleep, punishment, reward, and danger belonged to command. A man who had once walked where he wished now marched when ordered. A man who once slept under his own roof now slept where the army stopped. A man who once feared for his household now had to fear for the line, the standard, and the comrades beside him. The oath made this change sacred and severe. Roman soldiers swore loyalty. The oath was not a casual promise. It bound the soldier morally, religiously, and legally. To break it was not simply to disobey an employer. It was to violate a sacred commitment. The army was held together not only by pay and punishment, but by the deep ancient power of sworn obligation. The oath entered the soldier's inner world. It told him that his service had meaning beyond personal choice. It tied him to Rome, to commanders, to comrades, and to the gods who witnessed promises. In a world where religion, law, and public duty were woven together, an oath carried weight we should not underestimate. It made discipline more than practical, it made it part of cosmic and civic order. A man who swore became different, he had crossed a threshold. After that, training could begin in earnest. The body was forced into military shape through repetition. Marching was central. A soldier who could not march was of little use to an expanding power. Rome's campaigns demanded movement across long distances, often through heat, rain, mud, mountains, and hostile land. The army that arrived exhausted and disordered could be destroyed before the battle truly began. So marching was not only travel, it was training in obedience, endurance, and collective rhythm. A recruit learned to walk with weight. He learned the pace of the group. He learned that the road did not care about his pain. He learned that the pack must still be carried. He learned that the line of men ahead would not stop because his feet hurt. The ordinary act of walking became imperial labor. With time, the soldier's body adapted. The shoulders hardened. The feet toughened, though never enough to remove pain. The back learned the burden. The hands learned tools and weapons. The lungs learned dust. The mind learned to divide distance into smaller pieces, the next hill, the next halt, the next stream, the next command, the next evening camp. Endurance is often built this way, not by heroic feeling, by continuing. The soldier also learned weapons. The Roman sword, often imagined as the short stabbing blade of the legionary, became famous because it suited a disciplined style of close combat. But a sword is useful only when the man holding it knows how to stand with others. A recruit had to learn controlled violence. He had to strike without opening himself too much. He had to use the shield not only to protect his own body but to preserve the formation. He had to understand that wild movement could endanger the man beside him. The shield was not just personal defense. It was part of a wall of bodies. That wall depended on trust. A soldier had to trust that the man to his left and right would not abandon the line. He had to trust that orders had meaning. He had to trust the training enough to obey even when instinct screamed for escape. This trust was not soft. It was beaten into habit through drills, punishment, shared hardship, and the knowledge that survival often depended on others. Roman training taught men to fight as a group. That is easy to say but hard to feel. Imagine standing in a line while noise rises around you. The enemy ahead is not an idea. He is a moving body with weapons, breath, fear, anger, and the same desire to live that you have. Behind you are commands, beside you are comrades, around you is dust, shouting, metal, confusion. The body wants space, it wants to protect itself, it wants to turn away from danger. Training says no, stay. Hold, move when ordered, strike when the moment comes, do not break the rhythm. This is why the making of a Roman soldier was also the making of obedience under terror. Anyone can obey when calm. The army needed men who could obey when the mind narrowed and the world became violent. The recruit had to learn that fear was expected, but disorder was not. He did not need to be without fear. He needed to remain useful while afraid. Discipline made fear survivable. But discipline also had a cost. A soldier's individuality had to be pressed down. His private wishes were secondary. His body was corrected, punished, used, and trained. If he failed, punishment might fall not only on him but sometimes on others because the army understood shame and collective pressure. Men learned to watch each other, to fear letting the group down, to measure themselves against the standards of comrades. Brotherhood and surveillance lived close together. The unit could become a family of hardship. It could also become a place where failure was dangerous. This is one of the reasons military life creates such strong bonds. Shared danger ties people together, but so does shared discipline. The soldier beside you knows the same hunger, the same officer's voice, the same road, the same fear of punishment, the same cold night watch, the same ache after marching. He understands your life because he is trapped inside it with you. From such shared hardship comes loyalty, not always noble, not always gentle, but strong. The Roman army needed that loyalty because its wars became larger. As Rome expanded across Italy and then beyond, its soldiers faced enemies who tested them severely. The wars against Carthage, for example, forced Rome into a wider Mediterranean struggle. Hannibal's march into Italy shook Rome deeply. The disasters Rome suffered showed that its soldiers could be outmaneuvered, surrounded, and destroyed. The legend of Roman invincibility was built partly from the memory of times when Rome was very nearly broken. This matters for the soldier's story. Rome did not become powerful because it never lost. Rome became powerful because it survived loss. For the men in the ranks, that survival meant returning to service after catastrophe. It meant new armies raised after old ones were destroyed. It meant families losing sons, fathers, brothers, and still the city demanded more. It meant the soldier's body became part of a larger Roman refusal to accept defeat as final. This refusal was terrifying to Rome's enemies. A city that could lose thousands and still raise another army was not easy to destroy, but the human cost was immense. Behind every new levy were households disrupted, fields left unattended, mothers grieving, fathers aging, wives waiting, children growing without certainty, and men marching toward dangers created by decisions made far above them. Rome's endurance was built from private suffering. The soldier carried that suffering silently because history often records the campaign more clearly than the household left behind. We know of battles, treaties, commanders, and victories. But every army also casts an invisible shadow backward into civilian life. When men leave, work changes, families adjust, debts wait, harvests suffer, news travels slowly. The absent man remains present as worry. For a citizen soldier, war and home were tied together painfully. He fought for Rome, but Rome's demands could threaten the very household he served. Long campaigns, especially as Rome expanded farther away, made this tension worse. A short seasonal campaign near home was one thing, years of warfare abroad were another. The old model of citizen farmer-soldier came under pressure as Rome's wars grew longer and more distant. This pressure helped push Rome toward military change. Over time, the army became more professional, recruitment widened. Poorer citizens entered service more heavily. Soldiers increasingly depended on commanders' pay, booty, and hopes for land after service. The army became not only a civic duty, but a career and a path of survival. This transformation was not simple or immediate, and historians debate details. But the broad shift is clear. The Roman soldier became more permanently military. This changed loyalty. A citizen temporarily called to serve might feel strongest loyalty to the city and his class of fellow citizens. A long-service soldier, dependent on his commander for rewards and future settlement, could develop fierce loyalty to the general who led him, paid him, and promised land. This had enormous consequences for Roman politics. Armies could become attached to men, not only to the state. The soldier who carried Rome could also help tear Rome apart. That would become one of the great tragedies of the late Republic. The same military strength that allowed Rome to conquer the Mediterranean made it possible for ambitious commanders to challenge the political order. Soldiers followed men who had earned their trust, shared their campaigns, and offered them futures. The bond between commander and army became powerful enough to shake the Republic itself. But for the individual soldier, this was not an abstract constitutional crisis. It was personal. Who had fed him, who had led him to victory, who had promised land, who knew his years of service, who would protect him when the campaign ended. A distant Senate might seem less real than the general whose voice he had heard in camp, whose victories had brought spoils, whose enemies had become his enemies. Military loyalty grew from shared danger and practical dependence. Rome's political order struggled to contain that bond. This is another reminder that soldiers are never only tools. They have loyalties, expectations, and grievances. They can be disciplined, but they are not empty. They remember promises. They know when they are neglected. They can become restless when unpaid, unrewarded, or dishonored. The army is a machine only from far away. Up close it is men with hunger, men with anger, men with pride, men with memories, men who have killed and watched friends die, men who may not return quietly to poverty after years of violence. The making of a Roman soldier therefore created both empire and danger. Rome needed disciplined men, but disciplined men under powerful commanders could become political weapons. Rome needed long service, but long service changed the soldier's relationship to civilian life. Rome needed conquest, but conquest enriched generals and hardened armies in ways that destabilized the Republic. The soldier's story is always tied to Rome's larger fate. Still, before we move towards civil wars and emperors, we should remain with the making of the ordinary legionary, because the soldier did not begin as a force of politics. He began as a recruit learning the habits of service. His hair may have been cut, his clothing issued or adjusted, his name entered into records. His body inspected, his oath sworn, his training begun. He learned the sound of commands, the organization of the unit, the importance of the standard, the expectation of silence when silence was required and shouted response when response was demanded. He learned that the army had its own time, its own hierarchy, its own punishments, its own rewards, its own language of honor. He learned the officers. The centurion mattered deeply. More than a distant general, the centurion was often the face of discipline. He was close enough to see failure and punish it, close enough to recognize courage, close enough to lead from the front. Centurions could be harsh, respected, feared, experienced, and central to the functioning of the legion. To the ordinary soldier, the centurion may have mattered more in daily life than any emperor. The centurion's staff, voice, and presence represented the army's immediate authority. A good centurion could hold men together. A cruel or foolish one could make life miserable. A brave one could inspire. A careless one could waste lives. The recruit learned quickly which officers were respected and which were merely obeyed. Military hierarchy was not gentle, but it created clarity. Each man had a place. The unit had structure, orders moved downward, reports moved upward, standards marked identity. The soldier belonged not to a vague crowd but to a specific body of men. This gave him orientation. In chaos, structure matters. It tells a frightened person where to stand. The standard was especially powerful. It was more than decoration. It represented the unit's honor, identity, and continuity. To lose a standard was a terrible disgrace. To defend it was sacred duty. Men rallied around it because it made the army visible to itself. In dust, noise, and fear, the standard told soldiers where their center was. Human beings need symbols under pressure. Rome understood this. The eagle, the signs, the unit marks, the rituals, the oath, the camp layout, the commands, the repeated drills, all of these turned a mass of men into a military community. The recruit learned not only how to fight, but how to belong to an institution that existed before him and would continue after him. That continuity could be comforting. It could also make him feel small. A soldier might die, but the legion would march. A man might be forgotten, but the standard would remain. In this way, the Roman army gave meaning and erased individuality at the same time. It gave the recruit a place in one of history's most powerful systems, but that place required submission. It lifted him into the story of Rome while reducing him to one body among many. Some men may have found pride in that, others may have felt trapped, many likely felt both. The process of becoming a soldier also changed how a man related to violence. Civilian violence could be chaotic, personal, and sudden. Military violence was taught, organized, and commanded. The recruit had to learn not merely to defend himself, but to harm another person when ordered as part of a collective act. The army made violence disciplined, and disciplined violence is one of the most frightening forces in history. A mob may burn out. A disciplined army can continue. A furious individual may strike wildly. A trained soldier can wait. Rome's enemies often faced not only courage but patience. Roman soldiers could hold formation, absorb pressure, rotate, dig in, build siege works, maintain camps, and return again after defeat. The army's power lay in its capacity to continue under strain. This capacity began in training. A soldier learned that tiredness was not an excuse. Hunger was not an excuse. Rain was not an excuse. Fear was not an excuse. The order remained. The march continued. The ditch had to be dug. The watch had to be kept. The shield had to be lifted. The line had to hold. Such discipline can create greatness. It can also create hardness. A man trained not to listen to his own suffering may become capable of enduring much. He may also become capable of ignoring the suffering of others. The Roman soldier's toughness was admired, but toughness has a shadow. It can protect a man from collapse. It can also make mercy harder. The army had to teach men when not to feel too much. War often demands this. Empire depends on it. The Roman soldier might be ordered to storm a town, cut down defenders, guard captives, watch executions, or enforce authority among civilians who feared and hated him. He might tell himself he was obeying orders, serving Rome, protecting comrades, fulfilling the oath, earning pay, securing the future. All of these could be true within his world, but the effect on conquered people could be devastating. The soldier carried Rome's order. He also carried Rome's violence. To make him only noble would be false. To make him only cruel would also be false. He was a human instrument of a state that could bring roads and ruin in the same generation. This complexity is why the Roman soldier deserves a slow story. He cannot be understood only through battles. We must see him being made. The recruit under discipline, the marcher under burden, the builder of camps, the guardian of frontiers, the veteran waiting for discharge, the man far from home who gradually becomes part of the army's world more than the world he left behind. By the time training had taken hold, the recruit was no longer simply the man who arrived. He had learned army time. He had learned hierarchy. He had learned the weight of equipment, the sound of orders, the fear of punishment, the pride of belonging, the rhythm of marching, and the strange comfort of routine. He had begun to become Roman in a military sense. Even if he was already a Roman citizen, the army made a different Roman out of him, a harder one, a more obedient one, a more useful one, a more dangerous one. And when thousands of such men stood together, Rome became something more than a city. It became movement. It became pressure. It became a line of shields on a distant battlefield, a camp rising at dusk, a road cut through hostile country, a standard lifted against the sky. The making of the soldier was the making of the empire's reach. And once Rome learned how to make such men again and again, the ancient world began to feel the weight of their footsteps. And those footsteps did not remain inside Italy. They moved outward slowly at first, then with a force that changed the shape of the Mediterranean world. The Roman soldier who had once fought close to home began to find himself in places his ancestors may never have imagined. Across the sea in Sicily, beneath the hot skies of North Africa, among the cities of Greece, along the coasts of Spain, in the forests of Gaul, and eventually on the edges of deserts, rivers, mountains, and distant frontiers. Rome's army did not become legendary because it never faced danger. It became legendary because each danger changed it. Every enemy taught Rome something. Some taught it through defeat, some through humiliation, some through terror, some through long, exhausting resistance. The Roman soldier was shaped not only by Roman discipline but by the enemies who forced Rome to adapt. This is one of the quiet truths of empire. A conquering power often carries within itself the marks of those it fought. Rome defeated many peoples, but it also learned from them. It changed after meeting them. It absorbed their weapons, tactics, gods, wealth, ships, roads, ideas, and fears. The Roman army that later generations remember was not born complete. It was hammered into shape by centuries of struggle. One of the greatest turning points came when Rome began to look beyond Italy and fight Carthage. Carthage was not a wild enemy at the edge of civilization. It was rich, organized, maritime, old and powerful. Its ships crossed the western Mediterranean. Its merchants moved through ports and islands. Its influence reached North Africa, Sicily, Spain and beyond. To Rome, Carthage was not only another rival. It was another kind of world, a sea power, a trading empire, a civilization whose strength did not look exactly like Rome's own. The wars against Carthage forced Rome to expand its imagination. A city that had grown through land war now had to think about fleets, islands, supply lines, distant campaigns, and conflicts that did not end after one season. Roman soldiers and sailors were pulled into a struggle far larger than the older wars of central Italy. The Mediterranean itself became a battlefield. For the ordinary soldier, this meant distance. Distance from home, distance from familiar ground, distance from the short campaigns of earlier life. A man who might once have expected to return to his fields after a local conflict could now be sent far away to places where the language, food, weather, and landscape felt unfamiliar. Service stretched, danger widened. Rome's wars became too large to fit easily into the old citizen-farmer rhythm. Then came Hannibal. Few enemies shaped the Roman military mind more deeply. When Hannibal crossed into Italy with his army and elephants, when he defeated Roman forces again and again, when he shattered Roman confidence at battles remembered for their scale and horror, he forced Rome to confront the possibility of its own destruction. The Roman soldier learned through Hannibal that courage without careful command could become massacre. He learned that Roman discipline could be trapped. He learned that even a powerful army could be surrounded, confused, and destroyed by a brilliant enemy. The memory of Cannae did not simply belong to generals and historians. It belonged to the Roman soldier as a warning. A battlefield could become a grave for tens of thousands. A confident army could vanish in a day. The line could hold too long in the wrong place. The enemy could understand Roman aggression and turn it into weakness. The men in the ranks could obey bravely and still be led into disaster. This is a difficult lesson for any army. It means discipline is not enough, courage is not enough, numbers are not enough. The soldier depends on the mind of command, the condition of the ground, the movement of the enemy, the timing of decisions, and the strange uncertainty that hangs over every battle before it begins. But Rome's response to catastrophe became part of its legend. It did not surrender, it raised more men, it endured grief, it changed strategy. It learned to avoid Hannibal's strongest kind of battle. It carried on when many societies might have broken. This refusal to collapse became one of Rome's most frightening strengths. For the soldier, it meant that Rome would keep asking. If one army died, another would be formed. If one generation was wounded, the next would march. If one family lost a son, another son might still be called. Rome's endurance was not abstract. It was built from repeated human offering. The wars with Carthage also pushed Rome deeper into the world beyond Italy. Victories brought provinces. Provinces brought garrisons. Garrisons brought long service. Long service changed soldiers. The army became less a temporary gathering of citizens and more a permanent instrument of Roman power. The soldier's life became longer, harder, and more professional. This transformation did not happen in a single moment, but one figure is often placed at the center of it, Gaius Marius. The changes associated with his era reflected pressures already building inside the Republic. Rome needed manpower. Poorer citizens needed opportunity. Wars were distant and demanding. The older property-based military system had grown strained. Over time, more men without the old level of property qualification entered military service, and the army became a path for those who had little to lose and much to gain. This changed the emotional contract of soldiering. A poor recruit might not be defending a farm he owned, he might be seeking pay. Food, spoils, status, belonging, a future grant of land, a way out of poverty. The army became not only a duty but a livelihood that changed everything. A man who served for many years became dependent on the military world. His comrades became his closest society. His commander became the person who might secure his rewards. His hope for land after service depended not on some distant ideal of Rome, but on political decisions, promises, influence, and loyalty. The professional soldier's life tied him closely to the men who led him. This created one of Rome's most dangerous developments. The army became more effective and more politically dangerous. A citizen army could serve the republic, a professional army could serve a general, not always, not automatically, but the possibility grew. Men who had marched, suffered, won, and bled under one commander could become loyal to him personally. They had shared hunger and victory with him. They had watched him reward bravery. They had trusted him in battle. They had heard his promises. If he marched against rivals, some might follow. The soldier who had once protected the Republic could become a weapon in its internal struggles. This was not because Roman soldiers suddenly became corrupt. It was because their lives had changed. A man who gives 20 years to war needs a future. If the state does not guarantee it clearly, he will look to the commander who does. Loyalty follows survival, gratitude follows reward, dependence follows long service. Rome's generals understood this. Marius understood it, Sulla understood it, Pompey understood it. Caesar understood it perhaps better than anyone. And the Republic, built for an older world, struggled to control armies whose loyalty had become personal, emotional, and practical. For the ordinary soldier, the names of great men became part of daily fate. A general's ambition could decide where he marched. A Senate quarrel could become a campaign. A political rivalry in Rome could pull men across rivers, mountains, and borders. The soldier did not always choose the meaning of the war he fought. He followed standards, commanders, comrades, and the path laid before him. This is one of the saddest parts of military history. The bodies that pay the price often belong to men who did not design the conflict. During the late Republic, Roman soldiers fought not only foreign enemies but other Romans. Civil war brought a different kind of burden. To fight a foreign enemy could be framed as defense, conquest, revenge, or glory. To fight another Roman was more troubling. It meant the military machine had turned inward. The discipline that had built empire now threatened the city that created it. Imagine a soldier in such a time. He still wakes to orders, still carries his pack, still sharpens weapons, still trusts the men beside him. But the enemy across the field may speak his language, honor some of the same gods, carry Roman equipment, and believe himself loyal to Rome too. Civil war makes obedience morally heavier, yet armies continued. The soldier's world was immediate: comrades, officers, standards, food, pay, fear, loyalty. Grand political principles may have been spoken, but survival remained close to the body. Men followed because they were bound by habit, oath, need, and belonging. The army had become their world. Julius Caesar's legions show this bond clearly. His soldiers marched through Gaul, endured long campaigns, fought difficult battles, and built a loyalty that became one of the decisive forces in Roman history. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he did not cross alone. He crossed with men who had lived the military life with him, men whose futures were tied to his fortunes. A river crossing became a political earthquake, but it was also a soldier's march. For the men in the ranks, the moment may not have felt like history at first. It may have felt like another order, another road, another movement under command. Only later would the meaning become clear. Rome's armies were no longer merely instruments of the state. They could become instruments by which the state itself was remade. The Republic fell slowly, through ambition, violence, fear, debt, reform, rivalry, and war. But the soldier was always there, carrying the consequences. He fought in campaigns that made generals famous. He secured power for men whose names history remembers. He became the muscle behind political transformation. When the Roman world finally settled into imperial rule under Augustus, the army changed again. The emperor understood that soldiers could make and unmake power. The new system had to control military loyalty more carefully. The legions became a standing professional force. Service terms, pay, discharge benefits, unit identity, and frontier deployment were organized in ways meant to serve imperial stability. The emperor became the supreme military patron. The soldier's oath and loyalty were now tied to the imperial order. This gave the Roman army a new shape. It became the backbone of empire. Legions were stationed across provinces and frontiers. Auxiliary forces recruited from non-citizen peoples expanded Rome's military capacity. Soldiers guarded borders, built roads, controlled movement, suppressed revolts, fought wars, and maintained the physical presence of Roman power. The army became not only a weapon for conquest but a permanent structure of rule. For a soldier, this meant life on the edges. The Rhine, the Danube, Britain, Syria, Judea, Egypt, North Africa, Dacia, Armenia. The deserts and riverlands and forests where Rome's authority had to be defended, negotiated, or imposed. A legionary in the imperial age might spend years far from the city of Rome itself. He might never see the capital whose name he carried. For him, Rome was not the forum or the Senate house. Rome was the camp, the pay, the oath, the eagle standard, the commander, the road, the fort wall, the bathhouse near the frontier, the local market outside the gate, the letters from home, the grave markers of comrades. The empire became local through soldiers. Where a legion stayed, life gathered around it, traders arrived, craftspeople followed, families formed around camps, settlements grew, local people sold food, animals, cloth, metalwork and services, soldiers spent wages, veterans settled after service. Roman coins circulated, Latin words entered local speech, gods traveled in both directions. The frontier was not simply a hard line separating Rome from others. It was a zone where cultures met under the shadow of military power. The soldier was part guard, part builder, part customer, part colonizer, part neighbor, part threat. In one village he might represent security, in another oppression. To a trader he might be income, to a rebel enemy, to a local woman perhaps husband, partner, danger or opportunity depending on the life and law around them. To a child growing near a fort, the soldier might be one of the ordinary sights of the world. This complexity matters. Roman military presence was not only battle. It was daily contact, and daily contact can transform societies more deeply than one campaign. A road built for troops could later carry merchants. A fort could become a town. A veteran colony could spread Roman habits. A local recruit could join the army and return changed. The army made Rome mobile, but it also made Rome settle. This was one of the empire's great paradoxes. Soldiers marched to conquer, then stayed to hold. The marching camp became the permanent fort, the fort became a settlement, the settlement became a Romanized town, military necessity became civilian landscape. Yet even in permanent forts, the soldier's life remained disciplined. He drilled, guarded, repaired, built, patrolled, and waited. Waiting was part of military life just as it had been part of gladiator life, though in a different way. Soldiers often wait more than they fight. They wait through rain, heat, rumors, inspections, shortages, bad orders, illness, distant wars that may or may not reach them, and the slow passing of service years. The popular image of the Roman soldier is battle. The daily truth was often labor. He cut timber, moved stones, dug ditches, built walls, maintained roads, carried messages, guarded gates, collected supplies, stood watch in cold darkness, polished equipment, trained again, answered roll call. This repetition held the empire together. A frontier did not survive through dramatic battles alone. It survived through watches kept on ordinary nights. Roads repaired after storms, supplies counted, fort gates closed. Patrols sent out, local disputes managed, reports carried, discipline maintained even when no enemy appeared. The empire depended on boredom as much as glory. That may sound strange, but it is true. A soldier who can only fight when inspired is not useful for long. Rome needed men who could continue under monotony, men who could obey in routine, men who could build in silence, men who could guard a wall for years without becoming useless through boredom. This kind of endurance is less celebrated than battlefield courage, but no empire survives without it. The imperial soldier also lived with the knowledge that the army could shape emperors. A ruler who lost military support was in danger. Armies proclaimed emperors, supported claimants, and sometimes decided the fate of the imperial throne. The soldier on the frontier might seem far from politics, but collectively, soldiers were never far from power. The emperor needed their loyalty. Donatives, pay, honors, and attention to the army mattered because the army was the foundation beneath imperial rule. The Roman soldier was therefore both servant and kingmaker. Most individual soldiers had little power. They obeyed orders, endured discipline, and lived within hierarchy. But as a collective body, the army could transform the empire. This tension made Roman politics unstable at many moments. The soldier could be controlled, but the army could not be ignored. This is one reason emperors spent so much time with troops or presenting themselves as military leaders. Even emperors who were not great soldiers needed military legitimacy. Coins showed victories, monuments celebrated campaigns, titles proclaimed conquest. The image of the emperor as commander helped bind the army to the imperial system. Again, we see how soldiers shaped Rome's imagination. The emperor needed the army's image. Rome needed the army's protection. Provinces felt the army's presence, enemies feared the army's discipline, veterans carried the army's habits into civilian life. The soldier was everywhere in the empire's hidden structure, but no system remains unchanged forever. As centuries passed, the Roman army continued to adapt, enemies changed, frontiers hardened, cavalry became more important in some contexts. Recruitment patterns shifted, non-Roman and provincial soldiers became increasingly central. The older image of the Italian citizen legionary gave way to a broader imperial army drawn from many peoples. Rome's army became less purely Roman in origin, but still Roman in structure, identity, and command. This is another deep transformation. At first, Rome's soldiers had made the empire. Later, the empire made Rome's soldiers. Men from the provinces entered service. Auxiliary troops brought local skills, weapons, and traditions. Some gained citizenship through service. Units developed identities far from Italy. The army became one of the great paths by which people from across the empire could become connected to Roman power. A man born on the edge of the empire could serve Rome, learn its language of command, earn citizenship, settle elsewhere, and become part of the Roman world in a way his ancestors had not been. The army was not only a machine of domination, it was also a machine of incorporation. It could absorb outsiders, reward service, and spread Roman identity. But incorporation and coercion often lived together. Some joined willingly for opportunity. Some were recruited under pressure. Some fought for Rome against peoples not unlike their own. Some defended borders drawn by rulers far away. The soldier's identity became layered, local by birth, military by training, Roman by service, loyal perhaps to a unit more than any abstract empire. This layered identity made the late Roman army both flexible and fragile. It could draw strength from many peoples, but loyalty had to be constantly maintained. Pay, leadership, supply, honor, and success mattered. When these weakened, armies could become restless. A hungry soldier is not sustained by imperial ideology for long. A badly paid army becomes dangerous. A neglected frontier becomes porous. A weak emperor cannot simply command loyalty by title. The army's strength was always tied to the state's ability to support it, and supporting it became harder. But before the decline, before the frontier crises and imperial fragmentation, the Roman soldier stood at the height of one of history's most effective military systems. He was no longer merely the citizen farmer called from his field. He was a long-service professional, part of a unit with history stationed across the empire, trained not only to fight but to build, police, guard, march, and endure. His equipment had become iconic. The large shield, the helmet, the body armor, the short sword, the throwing spear, the sandals, the pack, the tools, but equipment alone did not make him powerful. What made him powerful was the system behind the equipment. Training, command, roads, supply camps, discipline, engineering, recruitment, pay, punishment, reward, and the ability to repeat military organization across vast distances. The Roman soldier was never alone, even when he felt lonely. Behind him stood a machine, but inside the machine stood a man. This is the balance we must keep. A map shows legions stationed across frontiers, but not the cold fingers of a sentry at night. A monument shows soldiers in ordered relief, but not the smell of wet leather after rain. A victory inscription names the emperor, but not the man who carried stones for the siege ramp. A historian names the battle, but not the recruit who whispered a prayer before the first clash. The turning points of Roman military history are often told through reforms, wars, generals, and emperors. Those matter, but beneath each turning point were bodies adjusting to new demands. A longer war meant longer absence. A new recruitment system meant different hopes. A professional army meant a life spent under command. A frontier posting meant years in a place that became home only slowly. A civil war meant fighting men who might have been comrades in another life. The soldier carried each transformation personally. His body was where reform became real. His march was where policy became distance. His hunger was where supply succeeded or failed. His loyalty was where politics survived or broke. His grave was where the empire left one more quiet marker on the earth. As Rome moved from republic into empire, the soldier became more than the defender of the city. He became the living border of Roman power. Wherever he stood, Rome claimed presence. Wherever he marched, Rome extended pressure. Wherever he settled, Rome left roots. The ancient world felt his footsteps because those footsteps did not stop at the battlefield. They continued into roads, camps, forts, towns, frontiers, colonies, and memories. They continued through generations. And yet for the soldier himself, the great turning points may have been simpler. The day he swore the oath, the first march that broke his feet, the first time he saw a comrade die, the first winter far from home, the first pay received, the first punishment witnessed, the first wall built, the first battle survived. The first letter from home, the first moment he realized that the army had become his life. Rome's military history was made from such moments multiplied by thousands and thousands of men. And as the empire reached its widest power, those men would carry Rome into daily routines that were less famous than conquest, but just as important. The hard, ordinary life of the legionary, the march, the camp, the fort, the tools, the food, the discipline, the wounds, and the years spent beneath the eagle standard. And beneath the eagle standard, the Roman soldier's life became a rhythm of burden. The world remembers him in battle, but battle was only one part of his existence. More often, he marched, dug, carried, guarded, waited, repaired, trained, cooked, cleaned, and endured. The glory of Rome rested on work that was not glorious. The legionary's life was made of repeated actions, repeated commands, repeated discomforts, and repeated reminders that the empire expected his body to continue even when it was tired. A Roman soldier began each day inside order. The army did not wake like a village, slowly and unevenly with people choosing their own pace. It woke into command. The camp had structure. The unit had routine. The soldier had duties before he had preferences. He belonged to a world where time was organized by trumpet, order, watch, march, drill, and inspection. Even rest existed under discipline. This structure could be oppressive, but it was also what made the army powerful. An army that wakes slowly can be surprised. An army that cannot pack quickly cannot move. An army that cannot move cannot choose where to fight. An army that cannot build cannot survive far from friendly towns. Rome understood that military strength was not only in the moment of combat. It was in the repeated ability to prepare, move, stop, protect, eat, sleep, wake, and continue. The soldier's day might begin in darkness or early light. There would be equipment to check, orders to receive, animals and supplies to manage, fires to tend or extinguish, food to prepare or carry, tools to pack, and the endless concern of the march. Nothing could be forgotten lightly. A missing tool, a damaged strap, a neglected weapon, or careless preparation could become danger later. The Roman soldier carried much of his world with him. His weapons were only part of the burden. He might carry food rations, cooking equipment, tools, stakes for camp defenses, personal items, cloak, water container, and whatever else the day required. The exact load varied by period and circumstance, but the principle remained the same. The soldier had to be self-sufficient enough to move with the army and help create Roman order wherever the army stopped. He was a fighter. He was also a pack animal of the state. This is why ancient observers and later historians often emphasize the heaviness of the Roman soldier's burden. The legionary was expected to carry what he needed and still arrive ready for work. After a long march, he might not be allowed simply to sleep. He might have to build the camp, dig the ditch, raise the rampart, set the tents, guard the perimeter, gather supplies, prepare food, or take his turn on watch. The day did not end when the walking ended. For many soldiers, that may have been the hardest truth. Marching is exhausting enough when it leads to rest, but marching under military discipline often led to more labor. A tired man who had counted the final mile as relief might find that the real work began after the halt. Rome's armies survived because they refused to leave rest undefended. Each camp was a temporary fortress. Even if the army stayed only one night, it tried to impose form on the landscape. The camp was Rome in miniature, measured, ordered, defended, divided, watched. The layout helped men know where to go even under stress. Units had places, roads inside the camp had order, the commander's space had meaning, the standards had sacred importance. The defenses created a boundary between the disciplined inner world and the uncertain outer world. To build the camp was to tell the soldier, you are not a wandering crowd, you are Rome, even here. This mattered deeply in hostile land. A soldier sleeping behind a ditch and rampart could rest with more confidence than a man scattered in the open. A guard knew his post, an officer knew where units were placed, supplies could be organized. If attacked, the army had a structure from which to respond. The camp was not just shelter, it was a system for turning exhaustion into survival. But for the men who dug it, the system was pain. Imagine the end of a march through rain, mud pulling at sandals, cloaks heavy, fingers cold, stomachs empty, the landscape unfamiliar. Then the order comes to dig, the soldier takes up tools, earth sticks to iron, shoulders ache, men curse quietly or say nothing. The ditch slowly opens, the rampart rises, wooden stakes are placed. The camp takes shape under a sky that does not care who rules the world. This was empire's labor, not marble, not triumph. Not speeches, a wet soldier digging in failing light. If the camp was temporary Rome, the road was Rome stretched across distance. Roman soldiers built, repaired, and used roads as part of military life. Roads allowed faster movement, better supply, clearer communication, and stronger control. They were practical tools of power, but for the soldier walking them, roads were also long lines of fatigue. A good road could make marching easier than rough ground, but it did not remove the burden. The pack still weighed, the armor still rubbed, the sun still burned, rain still soaked wool and leather, feet still blistered. The road's straightness could become almost cruel because it seemed to promise progress while extending endlessly toward the next demand. The soldier learned distance through the body. Not by map, by pain, a day's march was not a number. It was the feeling of straps cutting into shoulders, the taste of dust, the rhythm of sandals striking earth or stone, the sound of gear shifting with every step. The smell of sweat, leather, animals, and cooking smoke when the army stopped. The relief of removing a helmet, the small pleasure of water, the private hope that tomorrow's road would be shorter. Marching also created the soldiers in a discipline. In battle, courage might burn hot for a short time. On campaign, endurance had to burn slowly for months or years. Many men can be brave for a moment. Fewer can remain useful through hunger, boredom, discomfort, and uncertainty. The Roman army needed slow courage. The courage to continue. The courage to obey without excitement. The courage to do the same hard thing again. Training never truly ended. Even experienced soldiers drilled. Weapons practice, formation movement, marching practice, guard routines, construction tasks, inspections, and exercises kept the unit prepared. The army feared softness because softness could appear quietly. Too much comfort made men slow, too much idleness made them restless, too little discipline allowed habits to decay. Commanders knew that an army not kept busy could become dangerous to itself, so soldiers worked. If there was no battle, there was drilling. If there was no march, there was building. If there was no building, there was repair. If there was no repair, there was inspection. The Roman soldier's life was full of tasks that prevented him from becoming simply a man waiting for war. He was kept inside usefulness. His body was constantly reminded that it belonged to the legion. Food shaped this life too. A soldier's diet was practical. Grain was central. It could be issued, carried, ground, cooked, and transformed into porridge, bread, or other simple meals. Depending on place and supply, soldiers might also eat beans, lentils, cheese, vegetables, olive oil, wine, vinegar mixed with water, meat when available, and local foods obtained through purchase, requisition, or foraging. But the heart of military food was not pleasure, it was endurance. A hungry army is fragile. A badly supplied army becomes angry. A starving army becomes desperate. Supply may not sound dramatic, but it decides campaigns. Generals can imagine bold plans, but soldiers need food. Horses and pack animals need fodder. Weapons need repair. Forts need stores. A march through hostile land becomes dangerous if supplies fail. A long siege becomes a battle against hunger as much as against walls. A frontier post survives only if grain, water, animals, and tools reach it regularly. The Roman soldier often had to help solve the problem of his own survival. He might grind his own grain, he might cook with comrades, he might gather firewood, fetch water, or carry rations. Food preparation became part of daily routine. The meal after labor was not a luxury. It was the body being restored enough to be used again. Around food, comradeship formed. Men who eat together begin to know one another in a way speeches cannot create. They know who complains, who shares, who hides extra, who jokes when tired, who becomes silent under hunger, who can be trusted with small tasks, who keeps his equipment clean, who tells stories of home. The smallest routines create bonds. The Roman army was organized into units, but within those units, smaller groups of soldiers lived closely. They shared tents, tasks, watches, meals, risks, and punishments. The great word legion can make the army seem huge and impersonal, but the soldier's emotional world was often smaller. The men he slept beside, marched beside, cooked beside, and might die beside. This small group could become his second household, perhaps stronger than his first after enough years. That is one of the emotional costs of military life. The army gives brotherhood, but brotherhood grows partly because men are removed from ordinary life. A soldier far from home needs the men around him. They understand the world he now inhabits. Letters from home may bring comfort, but comrades share the rain, the punishments, the officer's mood, the rumors, the fear before battle, and the relief after survival. Shared hardship makes memory. A civilian may ask later what a campaign was like, but only another soldier knows the silence before dawn when everyone suspects battle is near. Only another soldier knows the specific hatred of digging when exhausted. Only another soldier knows the way a unit changes after losing men. Only another soldier knows why a certain joke is funny, why a certain officer is feared, why a certain road is remembered with bitterness. The legionaries' closest history was written in comrades, but comradeship could be painful because soldiers disappeared. Disease took some, battle took others. Accidents, punishment, wounds, exposure, and exhaustion claimed lives in ways that rarely become famous. A man might share meals with another for years and then see him gone in a day. The army continued, the unit adjusted. A new man filled space, but memory did not obey the neat order of replacement. The soldier carried ghosts, not always dramatically, sometimes quietly in habits, an empty place at a meal, a familiar voice missing on the march, a story no longer told by the man who lived it. A piece of equipment passed to someone else. The army could move forward, but men remembered. Life in a permanent fort had a different rhythm from life on campaign, but it too was full of duty. Forts along frontiers could become complex communities. Inside the walls were barracks, headquarters, granaries, workshops, stables, bathhouses, shrines, and storage areas. Outside might grow a civilian settlement with traders, families, craftspeople, taverns, and local life shaped by the fort's presence. A soldier stationed there lived between military order and provincial society. He might buy goods from local traders. He might form relationships. He might learn local languages or customs. He might worship gods from home alongside gods encountered in the province. He might send letters, receive parcels, save money, gamble money, borrow money, or lose money. He might become more attached to the frontier than to the place he had left. The fort was not a battlefield every day, it was a small world. Guards watched gates, clerks kept records, craftsmen repaired equipment, officers held inspections, soldiers practiced, animals were cared for, supplies were stored, local people came and went under rules, news traveled along roads. Rumors moved faster than official messages. Boredom lived there too. Boredom is not a small thing in military life. It can wear down discipline. It can make men restless, foolish, cruel, or depressed. The army responded with routine because routine fills time and preserves control. A soldier might dislike constant tasks, but idleness could be worse in its own way. Too much empty time allowed the mind to wander toward home, resentment, fear, or trouble. So the fort kept moving even when it stayed still. Watches changed. Orders came, tools struck wood and stone. Armor was cleaned, roads were patrolled, reports were written. Men trained for battles that might never come. This is the hidden foundation of empire, long periods of preparation for events that may be rare, sudden, and decisive. The Roman soldier also lived under law and punishment. Military discipline followed him everywhere. Theft, desertion, cowardice, mutiny, disrespect, sleeping on guard, abandoning equipment, or failing duties could bring harsh consequences. The soldier's body was not fully his own. It could be punished by command, just as it could be risked by command. This produced fear but also clarity. Everyone knew the army was serious. The sentry knew that sleep could be fatal. The recruit knew that disobedience could cost him. The unit knew that shame could be collective. Such harshness helped make the army effective, but we should not romanticize it. Discipline built order partly through pain. It controlled men by making examples. It demanded obedience under conditions that could be unjust, frightening, and exhausting. A soldier might suffer from an enemy's cruelty, but also from his own army's severity. He lived between dangers. Yet discipline could also create pride. Soldiers who endured harsh training and strict routine often saw themselves as stronger than civilians. They may have looked down on softness. They may have believed that their suffering made them more Roman, more masculine, more worthy. The shared experience of discipline created identity. A man who had survived the army's demands belonged to a brotherhood not easily understood from outside. Pride and pain grew from the same root. The soldier's relationship with civilians could therefore be complicated. Civilians might admire soldiers, fear them, resent them, depend on them, or profit from them. Soldiers could protect roads from bandits, enforce law, and bring business to local communities. They could also bully, requisition, exploit, and remind civilians that Rome's power was not gentle when challenged. To the empire, soldiers were guardians. To some locals, they were occupiers. To themselves, they were men doing hard service. All three could be true at once. The Roman army's daily presence shaped the provinces in ways that battle narratives cannot fully capture. A permanent military post brought Roman goods, money, construction, language, law, and habits. Veterans settled and became landholders. Local elites interacted with commanders. Young men from local communities joined auxiliary units and returned with new identities. Military roads tied distant places into imperial systems. Forts became centers of exchange. The soldier's ordinary spending could change local economies. His need for boots, tools, animals, food, repairs, and entertainment created markets. His pay connected frontier communities to wider imperial currency. His movements linked remote places to administration. Even his religion traveled. Soldiers carried gods with them, adopted new ones, dedicated altars, and left inscriptions that reveal a world of fear, gratitude, and devotion. A soldier might pray before battle, thank a god after survival, dedicate an altar for health, honor the emperor's spirit, keep household gods in memory, worship local deities whose power seemed tied to the land where he now lived. The army was not spiritually empty. It was full of ritual, oaths, standards, sacrifices, festivals, divine names, and personal hopes. Standards themselves had sacred importance. The camp had religious life. The emperor's image carried political and spiritual meaning. The soldier lived in a world where gods, discipline, and empire stood close together. This made service feel larger than labor. The army did not simply employ a man. It surrounded him with symbols: the eagle's standard, the oath, the sacrifices, the commander's authority, the emperor's name, the unit's history, the memory of victories, the shame of lost standards. All of these gave military life a sacred and emotional weight. A soldier might complain about food and still feel awe before the standard. He might curse an officer and still fight for the unit. He might fear punishment and still feel pride in his legion. Human loyalty is rarely simple. The daily life of Roman soldiers also changed across rank. The ordinary legionary's experience was not the same as that of a centurion, officer, clerk, engineer, cavalryman, auxiliary soldier, or specialist. Some men had skills that gave them different duties: craftsmen, surveyors, medics, standard-bearers, musicians, armorers, clerks, builders, and others. The army was a whole working society. The standard image of a shield-bearing infantryman is powerful but incomplete. The army needed records, it needed messages, it needed supply officers. It needed builders, it needed medical care, it needed animal handlers. It needed men who could measure land, repair weapons, work leather, shape wood, build siege engines, and maintain the machinery of military life. Rome's army was terrifying in battle because it was organized outside battle. This organization made soldiers part of something much broader than combat. A man could spend years in the army and do far more digging and building than fighting. He could become skilled in construction, logistics, writing, trade, or administration. Military service could teach practical abilities that shaped his later life. A veteran might leave with habits and skills useful in settlement, but leaving was not easy emotionally. After many years, the army became the soldier's world. His body woke to its rhythms. His identity rested on rank, unit, comrades, and service. The civilian world might feel strangely loose. A man who had lived under command for decades could find freedom both welcome and unsettling. He may have longed for discharge, but when it came, he might discover that the person who left home no longer existed. The army had made him, and what makes a man also changes what he can become afterward. Veterans were important to Rome. They could be settled in colonies, rewarded with land or money, and used to strengthen Roman presence in provinces. A veteran carried Roman habits into civilian life. He might marry, farm, trade, serve in local administration, or live among other former soldiers. Veteran settlements could become anchors of Roman culture. In this way, military service continued after discharge. The soldier's body left the army, but the army did not fully leave him. He carried posture, language, discipline, scars, memories, and expectations into whatever life followed. He may have told stories to younger men, he may have kept old equipment, he may have joined other veterans in public life, he may have missed comrades more than he admitted, he may have woken sometimes before dawn as if the trumpet had sounded. The empire left marks on those who carried it, and yet many soldiers never reached that ending. Disease was one of the army's great enemies. Ancient warfare was not only men dying from swords and arrows. Camps could spread illness. Long marches weakened bodies. Bad water, poor sanitation, crowded conditions, exposure, wounds, and unfamiliar climates all threatened life. A soldier might survive battle after battle and die from fever. This quiet danger followed every army. It did not roar like combat, it crept A man who felt strong one week could be burning with illness the next. A unit could be weakened before meeting the enemy. A campaign could be shaped by sickness as much as strategy. Medical care existed, and Roman military medicine could be practical and organized, but ancient medicine could not defeat many dangers we now understand differently. The soldier's body remained vulnerable. No amount of discipline made him immune to infection, exhaustion, hunger, or cold. Weather could be as cruel as any enemy. Snow on a frontier, heat in the desert, rain in Britain or Germany, damp clothing, mud in the camp, burning sun on armor, cold watches at night, wind cutting through a cloak. Ancient soldiers lived close to weather in a way modern people often forget. The body had to endure the sky. The sky did not respect Rome. This simple fact is humbling. Rome could command armies, build roads, and conquer cities, but it could not command rain to stop falling on a marching column. It could not command winter to spare a sentry. It could not command heat to leave a helmet cool. The soldier stood between imperial ambition and physical reality. The body always pays first. That body also aged. A recruit entered with youth, fear, and energy. Years of service changed him. He learned efficiency. He grew tougher, he understood danger better, but he also accumulated damage. Feet, knees, back, shoulders, teeth, skin, eyes, hearing, scars all carried the long cost. A veteran might be stronger in judgment than a young man, but less quick in recovery. He knew how to save effort because he had less to waste. Experience teaches economy. The older soldier might watch new recruits with a mixture of amusement, irritation, and sadness. He might see himself in their nervousness. He might know which ones would learn quickly, which would complain, which might break, which might become reliable. He might offer advice or withhold it. He might tell stories that were half warning and half performance. Every army has such men. Men who have seen enough to become part of the institution's memory. They carry unwritten knowledge. How to pack well, which officer to avoid, how to sleep quickly, how to keep feet dry when possible, how to make poor food bearable, how to listen for danger, how to stay alive without looking cowardly, how to recognize when rumors are serious, how to endure punishment without losing the mind. This kind of knowledge rarely appears in official histories, but it is the knowledge that keeps men alive. The Roman soldier's daily life was therefore a mixture of strict order and human improvisation. The army gave rules, but men found ways to live within them. They made friendships, rivalries, habits, small comforts, jokes, songs, complaints, superstitions, and private rituals. They gambled, saved, argued, borrowed, prayed, traded, wrote letters, and looked for moments of pleasure where they could. Even under discipline, life leaks through. That life is what we should remember when we imagine the Roman legion. Not only the shield wall, not only the eagle, not only the battle line, but the soldier grinding grain, the soldier rubbing sore feet, the soldier repairing a strap by lamplight, the soldier standing watch in rain, the soldier laughing quietly with tent mates. The soldier staring at a letter from home, the soldier helping bury a comrade, the soldier building another camp after another march. Rome was carried by such ordinary scenes. The empire's greatness depended on men whose names are mostly gone. A few commanders became immortal in memory. Caesar, Scipio, Marius, Sulla, Trajan, Hadrian, and others stand clearly in history's light, but beneath them were countless soldiers whose individual lives vanished into the word legion. They appear in numbers, formations, casualties, inscriptions, tombstones, and fragments. Their anonymity is part of the tragedy and grandeur of military history. The empire needed them, history forgot most of them. Yet without them, Rome would have remained a city with ambitions too large for its reach. The soldier gave Rome distance. He gave it pressure. He gave it endurance. He made imperial commands physically possible. He brought Rome to places where senators never walked and emperors rarely stayed. When we say Rome ruled, often we mean soldiers stood somewhere, on a road, at a gate, beside a river. In a fort before a wall, at a frontier, in a camp under cold stars. The daily life of the Roman soldier was the daily life of empire becoming real. And after enough years of marching, guarding, digging, building, and waiting, the soldier might finally face the moment for which all this discipline had prepared him. The battlefield, where the ordered world of training met the chaos of fear, noise, wounds, dust, and death. And after enough years of marching, guarding, digging, building, and waiting, the soldier might finally face the moment for which all this discipline had prepared him. The battlefield, where the ordered world of training met the chaos of fear, noise, wounds, dust, and death. A battle in the ancient world was not clean. It was not the neat movement of arrows on a map. It was not only commanders making decisions from a safe distance. It was heat, breath, shouting, confusion, broken ground, slippery hands, tired arms, terror held behind discipline, and the terrible closeness of another human being trying to survive by ending you first. For the Roman soldier, the battlefield began long before the first clash. It began with rumors, an enemy nearby, scouts returning, officers speaking more quietly, orders changing, men told to prepare equipment. Standards brought forward, formations arranged, the camp growing tense. A soldier could feel battle coming before he saw it. The army's mood shifted, the ordinary complaints became fewer or sharper. Men checked straps, weapons, shields, helmets, water, and sandals with unusual care. Veterans became watchful. New recruits tried to look calm. Officers moved with purpose. Priests or commanders might perform rituals, take omens, make speeches, or remind the men of Rome, the unit, the emperor, the general, the gods, their comrades, and the shame of failure. But beneath all public language, each soldier faced a private question. Will I live through this day? The army could speak of honor, victory, revenge, duty, or glory. Those words mattered. They gave shape to fear. But inside the body, the question remained simple. A man looked at the shield in his hand and knew it might save him. He looked at the sword and knew it might be too late if he had to use it badly. He looked at the men beside him and understood that his life depended on them in a way more intimate than friendship. The Roman soldier did not stand alone. That was his strength. It was also his burden. If he broke, others might break. If he stepped back too soon, he could open space for the enemy. If he panicked, fear could travel through the line like fire through dry grass. In formation, every man carried not only his own life but part of the safety of others. This is why discipline had been beaten, drilled, repeated, and ritualized into the soldier long before battle. The moment of fear was too late to learn order. Order had to already live in the body. When the army formed for battle, the soldier became part of a visible structure. Standards marked units. Officers placed men. Lines formed. Reserves waited. Light troops, cavalry, auxiliaries, or allied forces might be arranged depending on the period and battle. The Roman army was not identical in every century, but its deeper habit was organization. Rome tried to make battle readable before it became uncontrollable. It tried to place men where they could support one another. It tried to keep reserves. It tried to use formations, signals, ranks, standards, and commands to preserve decision inside chaos. Yet no structure could remove fear. Across the field stood the enemy, not an idea, not a word in a history book. Men, faces perhaps hidden by helmets, paint, beards, shields, dust, or distance. Men with their own gods, languages, families, chiefs, kings, commanders, grievances, hunger, pride, and fear. Some had come to defend their homes. Some to raid, some to stop Rome from moving farther, some to obey their own leaders, some to win honor, some simply because the world had placed them there. Every battle is full of people who would rather not die. That is what makes it tragic. The Roman soldier may have been told to see the enemy as barbarian, rebel, traitor, invader, or obstacle. Such words help armies fight. They make killing easier to explain. But when the lines closed, the enemy became a body in front of him, close enough to strike, close enough to smell, close enough to hear. Ancient battle had a frightening intimacy. Before the clash, there could be waiting under sun, wind, rain, or dust. Waiting while commanders arranged forces, waiting while enemy lines shifted, waiting while missiles flew. Waiting while the body filled with energy it could not yet spend. Waiting is one of the cruelest parts of battle because the imagination fights before the soldier does. A man might hear insults shouted across the space. He might hear horns or trumpets, he might hear prayers, he might hear the creak of leather, the tap of metal, the breathing of men beside him. He might feel sweat running beneath armor, he might adjust his grip again and again. The battlefield for a moment could be almost still. Then movement began, perhaps slowly, perhaps with a command, perhaps with missile fire, perhaps with a shout from one side that grew until the whole line carried it. The Roman soldier had been trained for this. He knew when to advance, when to hold, when to throw, when to close. But the body still reacted, the heart beat faster, the mouth dried, vision narrowed. The mind tried to stay inside the drill because drill was the only bridge between fear and action. In some periods, Roman soldiers used the heavy throwing spear before closing with the sword. A well-timed throw could break shields, wound enemies, disrupt formation, and create the moment needed for the line to press forward. But throwing was not the end, it was the beginning of closeness. The shield came up, the sword came ready. The line moved, the enemy came nearer. Then the ordered world met impact. The first clash could be terrifying beyond easy description. Shields striking shields, men pushing, weapons stabbing, cutting, glancing, breaking. Bodies pressed so tightly that movement became difficult. Dust rising, commands lost in noise. The front ranks trapped between the pressure behind them and the danger in front. A man might not see much beyond the edge of his shield, the shoulder of the man beside him, the flash of a weapon, the open space where an enemy's body appeared. Battle was not continuous heroic motion, it was bursts, pressure, withdrawal, a shove, a strike, a scream, a command, a body falling, a gap closing, a moment to breathe, then pressure again. The Roman soldier's training mattered because it gave him something to do inside terror. Lift the shield, keep formation, use short controlled movements, do not swing wildly, do not waste strength, stay with the unit, watch the officer, follow the standard, trust the man beside you. Holding was often the hardest thing. A man's instincts might urge him to run from danger or rush forward in panic. The army demanded neither unless ordered, it demanded controlled endurance. In close combat, discipline could be more valuable than fury. Fury burns quickly, discipline remains when fury is gone. The Roman soldier was dangerous because he had been trained to remain useful after the first shock. Still, no formation was invincible. Roman soldiers could be defeated, surrounded, ambushed, trapped, broken, and slaughtered. The idea that Rome always won is a memory shaped by eventual success, not by every battlefield. Roman history contains disaster after disaster. Armies lost, standards captured, commanders killed, soldiers drowned in mud or surrounded in dust, units destroyed far from home. For the soldier, defeat was not a historical lesson, it was chaos. When a line began to break, fear changed form. It was no longer fear of what might happen, it was fear happening. Men pushed backward, orders became unclear, the enemy sensed weakness. The wounded cried out, those behind might not know why the front was moving. A small collapse could become larger. Once panic entered a formation, it could destroy what training had built. The Roman army feared this because it understood it. Discipline existed to prevent the moment when many men suddenly became individuals again. An army is strongest when men act together. It is most vulnerable when each man begins to think only of escape. Roman commanders used reserves, unit structure, officers, standards, and punishment to hold men together. But battle could still overwhelm. A commander might misjudge terrain, cavalry might fail, allies might abandon the field, the enemy might strike from the side or rear, dust might hide movement, noise might confuse signals. A single unexpected event could turn confidence into terror. This uncertainty is why veterans mattered. A veteran had felt the shock before. He knew the first panic did not always mean defeat. He knew that noise could be survived. He knew that a wound nearby did not mean his own death was certain. He knew how to conserve movement. He knew the rhythm of a push. He knew the danger of turning too soon. His calm could steady younger men. His presence could become a quiet anchor. But veterans were not made of stone. They too feared death. They only knew fear's shape better. There is a kind of sadness in imagining an experienced Roman soldier before battle. He understands more than the recruit. He knows the danger is real. He has seen men die from small mistakes. He has seen brave men fall and cowards survive. He knows that fortune moves through battle in ways no commander can fully control. He knows that after the speeches, after the standards, after the prayers, the body still enters the same danger as everyone else. Experience does not erase fear. It teaches a man how little certainty there is. And yet he stands. This is where the Roman soldier's courage becomes human rather than legendary. Not the courage of someone who believes he cannot die. The courage of someone who knows he can. A battlefield could also reveal the darker side of discipline. When Roman soldiers won, the victory did not always end with the enemy simply running away. Pursuit could become slaughter. A broken enemy was vulnerable. Towns could be stormed. Prisoners could be taken, enslaved, executed, or displayed. Spoils could be seized. Civilians could suffer terribly. The same discipline that held the Roman line could be turned toward ruthless destruction once command allowed it. Empire was not built only by brave defense, it was built by organized violence. A Roman soldier might have felt pride in victory, relief at survival, and horror at what victory required, perhaps all in the same day. He might have taken spoils because that was expected and useful. He might have seen suffering he could not forget. He might have told himself it was necessary. He might have hardened. He might have laughed with comrades that evening because the living often laugh after danger, not because they are cruel, but because they are alive and do not know what else to do with the energy of survival. Battle changes men in ways records rarely explain. A soldier who survives his first battle is not the same afterward. The fear imagined before battle has become memory. He has learned whether his training held. He has learned the sound of wounds. He has learned the smell of blood in dust. He has learned how close death can come and pass by. He has learned that the man beside him might disappear. He has learned that victory does not feel clean when one is standing among the bodies. After battle, the army had work to do. The wounded needed care. The dead had to be counted, buried, burned, or left depending on circumstance, time, danger, and custom. Weapons had to be gathered, prisoners guarded, spoils collected, reports made, units reformed, orders given. The battlefield after fighting may have been more terrible than the fighting itself. During combat, the mind narrows around survival. Afterward, the full scene becomes visible. Bodies lie in unnatural positions. Men call for water. Friends search for friends. Officers count losses. Animals wander or scream. Dust settles over broken shields. The ground that had been the center of history for a few hours becomes a place of flies, silence, and work. The Roman soldier had to step through that world. If victorious, he might be ordered to continue. If defeated, he might be running, hiding, regrouping, or captured. If wounded, he entered another kind of battle. Ancient wounds were dangerous even when not immediately fatal. A cut could become infected. A broken bone could heal badly. An arrow or spear wound could lead to fever. A man who walked away from battle might die days later. Medical care existed, especially in organized armies, but it had limits. Pain, infection, blood loss, and shock were constant companions of war. The soldier feared not only the blade that killed instantly, he feared the wound that waited. Care for the wounded reveals again the practical humanity of the army. Wounded soldiers mattered to the unit, to comrades, and to commanders who needed manpower. Some men would be treated, bandaged, carried, or left depending on severity and circumstance. A comrade might help a wounded friend because shared hardship created loyalty. An officer might order care because the army needed soldiers. Both motives could exist together. For the injured man, motives mattered less than survival. A bandage, water, shade, and the hand of another person could become the whole world. Battle also created stories. Soldiers remembered who stood firm, who panicked, who saved someone, who died bravely, who failed, which officer was reckless, which unit held, which standard nearly fell. These stories traveled through the army and became part of its internal memory. Official histories might record the general's plan, but soldiers remembered smaller truths. The man who kept his place, The centurion who shouted until his voice broke, the recruit who froze, the veteran who pulled someone back into line. The moment the enemy began to give way, the terrifying silence before pursuit, such stories shaped reputation. A soldier's honor among comrades mattered deeply. Public rewards existed, but so did the quieter judgment of men who had seen the same danger. To be trusted in battle was one of the strongest forms of belonging. To be known as unreliable could be difficult to endure. Military brotherhood is built on memory of fear. The Roman army used rewards to reinforce courage. Decorations, promotions, praise, shares of booty, and public recognition could mark bravery. Men who showed exceptional courage might rise in status. A centurion could be promoted for valor. A soldier might be honored before the unit. Such rewards told men that courage was seen and remembered, but the dead could not enjoy rewards. This is another bitter truth of military glory. The bravest act may end in silence. The soldier who saves the line may not live to hear his name praised. The army may remember him for a while. His family may receive news, perhaps late, perhaps incomplete. His body may rest far from home. His name may appear on a stone if fortune and resources allowed. Many had no such memorial. They became part of the unnamed cost of Roman success. The battlefield also forced soldiers to confront the meaning of the enemy. A man who had been trained to think of the enemy as a category might see him up close after victory. Young, old, wounded, frightened, angry, dying, praying, cursing, silent. War reduces people into sides, but the aftermath can reveal their humanity. This recognition may have been unwelcome. It is easier to carry out violence when the other remains distant. Some soldiers hardened against it, some perhaps felt pity, some ignored what they could, some were changed. We cannot know each heart. But we can know the conditions. A soldier repeatedly exposed to violence must find ways to live afterward. Some turn to jokes, some to ritual, some to drink, some to pride, some to silence, some to cruelty, some to discipline, some to memory. The Roman army did not have modern language for trauma, but Roman soldiers were still human beings. Their minds could be marked by what they saw. The ancient world did not lack inner wounds simply because it named them differently. A soldier returning from battle to camp might clean his equipment, eat, sleep, boast, mourn, or stare into darkness. The army continued around him. Duties resumed. The dead were gone, but the living still had to work. The camp had to be guarded. The next march had to be prepared. Orders had to be obeyed. Rome's machine did not pause long for private grief. This continuation could be cruel. It could also be necessary. If the army stopped after every loss, it would fail. So grief became compressed into ritual, memory, and comradeship. Men learned to carry it while moving. The soldier's emotional life had to fit inside the demands of command. This is why the Roman soldier was both strong and damaged by the same system. The battle itself was only one expression of Roman military power. Siege warfare may have been even more revealing. To besiege a city required patience, engineering, cruelty, and endurance. Soldiers built ramps, towers, trenches, walls, camps, and machines. They cut off supplies. They waited while hunger worked inside the city. They faced sorties, missiles, disease, and exhaustion. A siege was battle slowed down into weeks, months, or longer. For the soldier, siege work could be miserable, digging under threat, hauling timber, moving stones, building while arrows or stones fell. Guarding lines through cold nights, watching a city refuse to yield, waiting for hunger to do what swords could not. A siege turned the soldier into both laborer and instrument of pressure. He might never enter a dramatic open battle, yet his work could decide the fate of thousands. When a city finally fell, the violence could be terrible. Storming walls after long resistance often unleashed fury. Soldiers who had suffered through the siege might show little mercy. Commanders might allow plunder as reward and warning. Again, discipline and violence walked together. Rome's engineering brilliance was not separate from conquest. The same ability to build roads and aqueducts helped build siege works and encircling walls. The soldier's shovel could serve civilization or strangulation, depending on the order. The Roman soldiers' relationship with death was therefore constant but varied. Death could come in open battle, ambush, siege, illness, punishment, accident, or old wounds. It could come suddenly or slowly. It could come with glory, shame, confusion, or no meaning at all. The army tried to give death a framework through honor, duty, ritual, and memory. But for the man dying, such frameworks may have felt distant. Perhaps he thought of home, perhaps of water, perhaps of a comrade's voice, perhaps of nothing. History cannot enter those final moments except with humility. What it can do is remember that the Roman military machine, so often admired for discipline, was made of mortal bodies. Every formation was fragile because every man inside it could blade. Every victory cost strength. Every conquest left grave. The empire's lines on a map were drawn through human vulnerability. And yet soldiers continued to march. This is not because they were inhuman, it is because humans can become accustomed to extraordinary conditions when those conditions become daily life. The recruit fears everything at first. The veteran still fears, but differently. The army gives language and structure to danger. It turns terror into duty. It turns survival into pride. It turns loss into memory. It turns obedience into identity. In battle, that identity was tested. If the line held, the soldier felt the power of the group. He knew that together they had survived what would have destroyed individuals. This could create immense pride. To stand with a legion and win was to feel that one belonged to something almost larger than ordinary life. The eagle standard, the name of the unit, the praise of commanders, the memory of victory, all could bind men more deeply to the army. Victory is one of the strongest makers of loyalty. Men who survive together believe in what saved them. If discipline saved them, they believe in discipline. If the commander led well, they believe in the commander. If comrades held, they believe in comrades. If Rome rewarded them, they believe in Rome. But defeat could also shape loyalty if the army survived it. Shared suffering can bind men almost as strongly as shared victory. A unit that endures disaster and reforms may carry a darker pride. We were broken, but we remained. Rome itself built much of its identity from survival after defeat. The soldier inherited that stubbornness. The battlefield also revealed leadership. Commanders far above could seem remote, but officers near the line mattered intensely. A centurion who stood firm under danger could hold men together. One who panicked could destroy trust. Officers led not by words alone, but by visible courage. In many armies, leaders who shared danger earned deeper respect than those who only commanded from safety. The Roman centurion became one of the great figures of this world. Hard, experienced, often brutal, often brave, close enough to punish, close enough to die. For the ordinary soldier, the centurion may have embodied Rome more immediately than any emperor. His orders shaped the day. His discipline could hurt, his courage could inspire, his death could shake the unit, his approval could matter more than distant honors. In battle, such men stood at the edge where command met fear. They had to make others obey while their own bodies were exposed. That required a particular kind of hardness. Not all possessed it well. Some were hated, some were admired, some were both. The army was human enough to contain every kind. The battlefield did not end when the enemy fled. Pursuit required energy and caution. A fleeing enemy could turn if pressed badly. A victorious army could become disordered through greed. Men chasing spoils could lose formation. Commanders had to decide how far to pursue, whether to regroup, whether to secure the camp, whether to prepare for another attack. Victory itself could become dangerous if discipline relaxed too quickly. The Roman soldier learned that survival did not come at the moment the enemy turned. It came when order returned. Only when the unit reformed, the wounded were managed, the dead counted, the watches set, and the camp secured could men begin to believe they had survived. Even then, survival was temporary. There was always another march, another campaign, another frontier, another order. This is the exhaustion at the heart of empire. Winning does not end the need to win again. A conquered province must be held, a defeated enemy may rebel, a frontier may shift, a new emperor may seek glory. A rival power may rise. Soldiers who fought one war could be sent to another. The army's success created new obligations. The Roman soldier carried not one battle but the endlessness of Rome's ambitions. And across years this could change what battle meant to him. The first battle might feel like the center of life. The 10th might feel like a familiar nightmare. The veteran may no longer believe speeches as he once did. He may care less for glory and more for formation, food, weather, and whether the commander is competent. He may still be brave, but his bravery becomes practical. Practical courage is quieter than youthful courage. It does not need to imagine glory. It only needs to know what must be done. A veteran lifts the shield because it is time. He checks the strap because loose gear kills. He watches the ground because uneven ground matters. He listens for the order because confusion is dangerous. He trusts the men he knows and doubts the ones he does not. He saves strength because the day may be long. Such men made Rome formidable, not because they were always heroic, but because they were hard to surprise, hard to scatter, and hard to impress with fear they had already met. And yet, even the hardest soldier could break. We should not turn Roman discipline into myth. Men deserted, units mutinied, armies panicked. Soldiers complained, negotiated, demanded pay, refused orders, and followed rival commanders. The Roman army's strength required constant maintenance because human beings do not remain disciplined automatically. Every battle threatened to undo years of training. Every hardship tested loyalty. Every unpaid wage, bad ration, brutal officer, pointless campaign, or failed promise weakened the invisible thread between soldier and state. This thread mattered. The Roman soldier fought not only because he feared punishment, but because the system gave him reasons to continue. Pay, comrades, identity, rewards, land, citizenship, pride, duty, habit, and belief. If too many of these failed, discipline alone became brittle. A soldier can obey from fear for a time. He endures longer when he also has something to hope for. For many, that hope was discharge, land, money, promotion, survival, or simple return. For others, it was the unit's honor, the commander's favor, the respect of comrades. Hope did not make the army gentle, but it made service bearable. After a battle, hope might become very small: a cup of water, a wound not infected, a friend found alive, a night without attack. A letter still carried inside a pack, a promise that the campaign might end. These small hopes kept men human. The battlefield then was not only the place where Roman discipline proved itself. It was the place where the soldier's entire life of training, marching, building, eating, waiting, fearing, and hoping came together. Every ordinary day before battle mattered. The shield lifted in combat because it had been lifted in practice. The line held because men had been punished, drilled, and bonded. The camp after battle rose because soldiers had built camps even when tired. The wounded were carried because comradeship had formed through shared life. War is never only the moment of violence. It is everything that prepares men to enter that moment and everything they carry afterward. The Roman soldier's battlefield story is therefore both impressive and sorrowful. Impressive, because few military systems in the ancient world matched Rome's ability to organize human endurance across centuries. Sorrowful because that endurance served conquest, civil war, punishment, and imperial ambition as often as defense. The soldier's courage was real. The uses of that courage were not always noble. This is the mature way to see him, not as a simple hero in shining armor, not as a faceless instrument of oppression, but as a man shaped by a system that demanded strength, gave him belonging, exposed him to horror, rewarded endurance, punished weakness, and used his body to right Rome across the world. When the battle ended and the soldier returned to camp, he did not step out of history. He stepped back into the long routine that made the next battle possible. Equipment cleaned, wounds treated, dead remembered or left behind, reports given, watches assigned, food prepared, orders awaited. The stars came out over the camp. Men slept if sleep came. Some dreamed of home. Some replayed the battle. Some listened to the breathing of comrades and felt grateful simply that the tent was not emptier. Some stared into darkness, knowing that Rome had survived another day because men like them had stood where they were told to stand. And somewhere beyond the campfires, the empire waited for them to march again. And somewhere beyond the campfires, the empire waited for them to march again. But not every march led to conquest. Some led to the frontiers, where Rome stopped advancing and began the long, uneasy work of holding what it had taken. For the Roman soldier, the frontier was one of the most important worlds he could know. It was not always a clear line drawn across the earth. It could be a river, a desert road, a chain of forts, a mountain pass, a wall, a watchtower, a road system, a zone of trade, or a place where Roman authority thinned gradually into lands Rome did not fully control. To the empire, the frontier was an edge. To the soldier, it was daily life. A man stationed far from Rome might wake not to marble temples and crowded streets, but to mist over a northern river, wind across a dry desert outpost, rain striking the roof of a wooden barrack, or the cold grey light of a fort in Britain. The frontier changed the Roman soldier because it forced him to live for years in places where Rome was present but never completely safe. There the soldier was not always fighting. He was watching, waiting, patrolling, repairing walls, escorting officials. Guarding roads, collecting information, sending messages, building towers, maintaining gates, meeting traders, looking across rivers toward lands that did not belong to Rome. The frontier was a place of tension held over time. A battlefield lasts hours or days. A frontier can last generations. This made frontier service psychologically different from campaign service. A campaign had movement, purpose, danger, and sometimes a clear end. A frontier posting could stretch into years of routine broken by sudden alarm. Most days might pass in dull labor. Then, without warning, raiders could cross, a rebellion could begin, a patrol could vanish, or rumors could arrive that a larger enemy was gathering beyond the border. Boredom and fear lived together. The Roman soldier on the frontier had to become comfortable with uncertainty. He might spend months guarding a place where nothing happened, yet he could never fully relax because the whole purpose of his presence was to be ready when something did happen. The fort was both home and warning post. The road was both route and vulnerability. The river was both boundary and invitation. Rome's frontiers were not all the same. Along the Rhine and Danube, rivers shaped the military imagination. Water could protect, but it could also be crossed. Forts and camps watched movement, patrols monitored banks and roads. Beyond the rivers lived peoples whom Rome traded with, fought, recruited from, feared, misunderstood, negotiated with, and sometimes tried to control through diplomacy and subsidies rather than direct conquest. In Britain, soldiers faced distance, weather, unfamiliar landscapes, and the strange feeling of being stationed at the edge of the known Roman world. Hadrian's Wall, when built, was not simply a wall in the modern sense of total separation. It was a military zone, a controlled frontier system of forts, gates, patrols, roads, and movement. It showed that Rome had chosen to mark and manage an edge. For the soldiers there, the wall was not a symbol in a history book. It was stone, wind, guard duty, cold hands, wet cloaks, local people, boredom, and the constant knowledge that the empire ended nearby. In the east, Rome faced different challenges. Powerful kingdoms and empires, especially Parthia and later Sasanian Persia, were not small raiding groups or scattered enemies. They were organized rivals with cavalry traditions, royal authority, wealth, diplomacy, and their own imperial ambitions. Against them, Rome could not simply rely on the same habits that worked elsewhere. Eastern warfare demanded distance, supply, cavalry awareness, desert endurance, diplomacy, and careful attention to fortified cities and long roads. In North Africa and the desert edges, soldiers dealt with heat, movement, forts, roads, tribes, trade routes, and the difficulty of controlling spaces that did not obey Roman patterns of city and field. In the provinces of the Near East, soldiers might stand near ancient cultures older than Rome itself, among temples, caravan routes, languages, cities, and religious worlds that made the empire feel layered and complex. The Roman soldier was therefore not one experience. He was many experiences under one military identity. A legionary on the Rhine did not live the same life as an auxiliary cavalryman in Syria, a guard on Hadrian's Wall, a soldier in Egypt, or a veteran settled in North Africa. Yet all were tied into the Roman military system. All wore in different ways the burden of empire. All stood where Rome needed armed bodies to make authority visible. The frontier soldier also became part of local life. This is important because modern imagination often pictures frontier soldiers as isolated men staring outward. Some were isolated, especially in small outposts, but forts often became centers of human activity. Around them grew settlements, markets, workshops, taverns, families, traders, craftspeople, and people who lived in the shadow of the army because the army created opportunity. The soldier bought things. He needed food, repairs, clothing, entertainment, animals, tools, and services. His pay entered local economies. His presence attracted people. His fort became a point around which life gathered. In this way, the frontier was not only military, it was social. A soldier might form a relationship with a local woman. He might raise children officially or unofficially depending on period and law. He might worship a local god whose shrine seemed powerful in that landscape. He might learn enough of a local language to trade, bargain, joke, command, or argue. He might spend so long in one province that the place of service became more real to him than the place of birth. The empire was held together partly by such slow attachments. Rome conquered with armies, but it remained through routines. The soldier on the frontier embodied both force and exchange. He could be a threat to local people, but also a customer. He could enforce imperial order, but also absorb local habits. He could look down on non-Romans, yet depend on them for food, knowledge, trade, and companionship. He could carry Roman identity outward and bring provincial influence back into the army. Frontiers are rarely pure barriers, they are places where people meet unequally. The Roman soldier lived in that inequality. He had power because he belonged to the army. He also had vulnerability because he was far from home, dependent on supply, and exposed to lands that could turn hostile quickly. His authority did not make him safe. The fort protected him, but it also marked him as a target. The road connected him, but it also showed enemies where Rome moved. The uniform gave him identity, but also made him part of the empire's visible face. That visibility could become dangerous during rebellion. No empire rules without resistance. Rome faced revolts in many places, from provincial uprisings to military mutinies to civil wars. For the soldier, rebellion was one of the hardest forms of conflict because it often emerged from people Rome claimed to govern. A revolt might begin with taxation, abuse, religious tension, local resentment, dynastic politics, military pressure, or a sense that Roman rule had become unbearable. To Roman authorities, rebels were often traitors, criminals, or barbarians. To the rebels, they might be defenders of freedom, land, gods, ancestors, or justice. The soldier had to fight inside that moral confusion. In Judea, for example, Roman soldiers faced revolts shaped by religion, identity, imperial pressure, and local suffering. Siege warfare, urban combat, and the destruction of sacred places left memories that lasted far beyond the military campaign. To the soldiers involved, the conflict may have been service under orders. To those who suffered under Roman force, it became catastrophe. The same event can live as victory in one record and devastation in another. This is why we must be careful with Roman military glory. The soldier's courage was real, but the meaning of his victory depended on where one stood. A captured city did not experience Roman discipline as beautiful. A family watching soldiers enter through broken gates did not see the elegance of the legion. A rebel facing execution did not feel the peace of Rome. The frontier and the province remind us that empire is always lived from both sides. The Roman soldier may have believed he brought order, others may have felt he brought fear. Both memories belong to history. Rebellions also revealed the strain placed on soldiers themselves. Suppressing revolt could be brutal work. It often involved long marches, punishment, destroyed settlements, executions, sieges, and mistrust of civilians. The soldier had to live among people who might hate him. He might not know who was enemy and who was simply afraid. That uncertainty could harden him. It could make cruelty easier. It could also make him uneasy because danger no longer stood openly in a battle line. It could be hidden in streets, villages, hills, or silence. War against rebellion wears differently on the mind. The enemy may not wear a uniform. The road may not be safe. The market may carry rumors. The guide may be false. The night may contain movement. The soldier must watch everyone, and to watch everyone with suspicion is to lose something human. Rome's soldiers were often praised for discipline, but prolonged occupation and counter-rebellion could strain discipline deeply. Men far from home, armed, afraid, bored, and given power over civilians could become dangerous in ways not always recorded proudly. Abuse, theft, extortion, violence, and arrogance were real possibilities. Military systems try to control such behavior, but control is never perfect. The soldier could be protector and predator. That contradiction follows armies across history. The Roman state wanted soldiers to serve order, but soldiers were human beings with weapons and power. Some acted with restraint, others did not. Some officers enforced discipline, others exploited command. Some communities benefited from military stability, others suffered under military presence. The empire's official story could not contain all these local truths. At the same time, the soldier himself could suffer under the empire he served. Pay might be delayed, supplies might be poor, officers might be corrupt or cruel. Long service could drain the body, promised rewards might feel uncertain. A man who had given his youth to the army might wonder whether Rome would remember him when he was old. Such frustrations could turn soldiers inward against command. Mutiny was one of Rome's recurring fears. A mutiny did not always mean soldiers rejected Rome. Often it meant they felt Rome or their commander had failed them. They demanded pay, discharge, better conditions, rewards, or justice. Sometimes they were manipulated by ambitious leaders, sometimes they acted from real grievance. In the soldier's mind, loyalty was not endless if promises were broken. The army was held together by discipline but also by exchange. The soldier gave service. He expected pay, food, leadership, respect, and future reward. When that exchange failed, danger grew. This became especially important in periods of political instability. Armies could proclaim emperors. Frontier legions could support one claimant over another. Soldiers could become decisive in imperial succession. The man who carried the shield might not sit in the palace, but collectively men like him could decide who did. This power changed the empire. In the High Empire, rulers tried to maintain the army's loyalty through pay, donatives, honors, presents, and military success. But as crises deepened, the bond between emperor and soldier became more unstable. The 3rd century in particular brought severe pressures: civil wars, rapid turnover of emperors, invasions, economic troubles, plague, and frontier threats. Soldiers became more central than ever because the empire needed military strength constantly. Yet that same centrality made the throne vulnerable to military opinion. The emperor needed the army knew it. When emperors rose and fell through military support, the soldier's world became politically charged even if his daily life remained hard and ordinary. A frontier unit might suddenly find itself part of a bid for imperial power. A commander might be hailed as emperor by troops. Marching orders might now point not toward an external enemy but toward another Roman army. Once again, the military machine could turn inward. Civil war was one of the deepest wounds in the Roman soldier's story. It forced men who served the same empire to kill one another for rival visions of authority. Standards that should have faced outward faced each other. Camps of Roman order became enemies. Men who might have shared language, training, equipment, and gods met as opponents because loyalty had split above them. For the ordinary soldier, civil war could feel both familiar and deeply wrong. The routines were the same: march, camp, form, obey, fight, but the enemy was another Roman soldier. This made the empire's violence return to its own body. Rome's military success had created a force so powerful that no political system could remain untouched by it. The soldier defended the empire but also became the means by which emperors were made and unmade. His loyalty became the prize for which powerful men competed. This was not the soldier's fault alone. It was built into the structure of Roman power. A vast empire needed armies. Armies needed commanders. Commanders with loyal armies had political weight. Political rivals sought military support. Soldiers followed those who fed, paid, led, and rewarded them. The cycle was dangerous and difficult to break. Meanwhile, external enemies did not pause politely while Rome struggled internally. Germanic groups along the northern frontiers, Persian forces in the east, desert peoples, rebellious provinces, and other threats pressed against imperial weaknesses. The Roman soldier might fight 1 year against foreign enemies, another year against rebels, another year against rival Roman forces, then return to a frontier made weaker by the very civil war that had pulled men away. The empire's enemies learned from Rome's troubles. A frontier stripped of troops became vulnerable. A poorly paid army became restless. A distracted emperor became an opportunity. The soldier often paid for decisions made far away. If too many troops were moved from one frontier to fight a civil war, those left behind became exposed. If supplies failed because politics disrupted administration, soldiers went hungry. If an emperor needed quick loyalty, he might promise rewards the treasury could barely support. The military body of Rome was strong, but it depended on the health of the state around it. As the empire changed, the soldier changed too. The older image of the classic legionary did not vanish overnight, but military needs evolved. The army became more diverse in recruitment and structure. Cavalry, mobile field armies, fortified frontiers, and regional commands became increasingly important. Soldiers from many backgrounds served under Roman authority. Some units retained old prestige, others reflected new realities. A late Roman soldier might not look like the familiar legionary from earlier imperial monuments. His equipment might differ. His unit might have different origins. His commander might be tied to a more complex imperial court. His enemy might be a raiding group, a Persian army, a rebel usurper, or another Roman faction. Yet he remained part of the same long story. A man under military discipline carrying the burden of Roman power in a changing world. The crisis of the Roman army was not that soldiers suddenly became weak. That is too simple. Many late Roman soldiers were capable, disciplined, and brave. The problem was larger. The empire's pressures became heavier: multiple frontiers, internal political instability, financial strain, recruitment challenges, changing enemies, and the difficulty of governing enormous territories. Soldiers continued to fight, build, and endure, but the system around them was under stress. A strong soldier cannot save a failing structure alone. This is a hard lesson. Rome had trained generations of men to obey, march, dig, and fight. But no army exists outside its society. It needs taxes, farms, workshops, roads, animals, weapons, commanders, legitimacy, and belief. If these weaken, even courageous soldiers struggle. The late Roman soldier may have stood bravely on a wall, but bravery could not repair every broken supply line, settle every succession crisis, or restore every damaged province. The soldier could hold a gate. He could not hold all of history still. And yet he tried. This is what gives the late Roman military world its melancholy power. Men still served, forts still stood, orders were still given, standards were still carried, roads still mattered, camps still formed, battles were still fought. Rome did not simply collapse because soldiers vanished. It changed because the old balance between army, state, economy, politics, and society became harder to maintain. In the Western Empire especially, the 5th century brought transformations that would have seemed unimaginable to earlier Romans. Barbarian groups were no longer only enemies beyond the frontier. Some entered the empire as federates, settlers, allies, invaders, soldiers, and political players. Roman commanders relied on non-Roman forces. Roman and barbarian identities interacted in complicated ways. Military authority, imperial legitimacy, and local survival became tangled. For the soldier, old categories blurred: who was Roman, who was ally, who was enemy, who served the emperor, which commander. Which city still obeyed. The world became less clear. A man could fight alongside federate troops one year and against a similar group another year. A commander with a Roman title might have non-Roman origins. A local population might trust a barbarian king more than a distant emperor. Roman military identity did not vanish, but it became part of a more fragmented world. The soldier's experience became one of uncertainty not only in battle but in belonging. Earlier, Rome had seemed like the center that absorbed others. Now, in parts of the West, Rome itself was being reshaped by those it had once tried to control. The army, always a place of mixing, reflected this transformation. Men from beyond older borders entered Roman service. Some became essential to Roman defense. Some gained power within Roman politics. Some turned against Roman authorities when agreements failed. The empire's military system became both bridge and battlefield between worlds. This is why the fall of Rome cannot be understood as a simple story of outsiders defeating weak Romans. It was more complex and more human. Rome had long recruited outsiders, made allies, settled peoples, granted citizenship, and absorbed foreign soldiers. The army had always changed through contact, but under late pressures these processes became harder to manage. The balance between integration and fragmentation weakened. The Roman soldier stood inside that weakening balance. He may not have understood the full transformation. Few people living through major historical change understand it clearly. To him, it may have appeared as unpaid wages, new commanders, strange allies, abandoned posts, emergency marches, rumors of cities sacked, taxes harder to collect, forts neglected, orders contradicted, or familiar structures no longer reliable. Collapse is often experienced not as one event but as many failures of expectation. The pay does not arrive, the road is unsafe, the commander changes, the fort is undermanned, the local people no longer obey, the emperor is far away, the old confidence is gone. In such a world, soldiers could become protectors of local order or predators of local weakness. Some units may have held communities together. Others may have dissolved, joined strongmen, become attached to regional powers, or blended into new military structures. The Roman soldier did not disappear in a single moment. He transformed into other kinds of armed men serving new political realities. The Western Empire's political collapse did not mean everyone woke up one morning in a different world. Many Roman habits continued. Titles remained, laws survived, cities persisted, roads still carried people, Latin continued, military service continued in changed forms, but the old imperial framework that had given the Roman soldier his clearest identity weakened. The legionary as the great symbol of Rome passed into memory. In the Eastern Empire, Roman military identity continued much longer, changing into what we later call Byzantine forms. Soldiers still served an empire that called itself Roman. They guarded frontiers, fought Persians, Arabs, Slavs, Bulgars, and many others across centuries. The Roman soldier did not truly end with the fall of the Western Empire. He changed language, equipment, tactics, religion, and political world. But the continuity remained deeper than many modern viewers realize. This connection is important for your channel's next topics. Roman soldiers leads naturally to fall of Rome. Fall of Rome leads naturally to Byzantium. Byzantium carries the Roman soldier forward into a different world. The man with the rectangular shield and imperial eagle eventually gives way to soldiers under Christian emperors, Greek-speaking administrations, new enemies, new tactics, new frontiers, and new forms of survival. Yet they still saw themselves in many ways as Romans. The empire did not end in their eyes, it transformed. For this episode, however, we remain with the soldier of the older Roman world standing at the point where strength becomes strain. He has marched through conquest, he has guarded frontiers. He has fought foreign enemies, he has suppressed revolts. He has followed generals in civil wars. He has built roads and forts. He has carried the eagle into lands that never asked for Rome. He has watched the empire grow until its edges became harder to defend than its leaders could admit. And now, as the Roman world begins to age, the soldier becomes one of the most tragic figures in it. Still disciplined, still necessary, still feared, but increasingly asked to hold together a system larger than any man, any unit, or any army could fully control. The empire had been built on his footsteps, its crises would also be measured by them. A frontier abandoned, a road no longer safe, a fort falling quiet, a legion marching not outward for conquest but inward toward civil war. A soldier standing on a wall looking into the distance, wondering whether Rome still had enough strength behind him to answer what was coming. This is where the story begins to darken, not because Roman soldiers stopped being brave, but because bravery by itself could no longer carry the weight of Rome. There comes a point in the life of every empire when the soldier is asked to do more than any soldier can do. He can guard a wall, but he cannot make the treasury full. He can march to a frontier, but he cannot end every civil war. He can hold a gate, but he cannot restore trust between rulers and ruled. He can defeat one enemy, perhaps many enemies, but he cannot stop the slow weakening of a world whose problems have grown larger than the battlefield. This was the burden placed on the Roman soldier as the empire aged. For centuries, Rome had trusted its military strength as the final answer. When enemies appeared, soldiers marched. When cities rebelled, soldiers besieged them. When roads were unsafe, soldiers patrolled them. When emperors needed legitimacy, soldiers acclaimed them. When provinces shook, soldiers were sent to restore order. The army became the empire's strongest arm, and because it was strong, Rome used it again and again. But the more Rome depended on the army, the more dangerous that dependence became. A state that needs soldiers for everything must also feed them, pay them, command them, reward them, and keep their loyalty. If it fails, the strongest arm can become restless. Soldiers do not live on glory alone. They need grain, coin, boots, weapons, officers they can trust, and a belief that their service still has meaning. When those things weaken, even the most disciplined army begins to change. The later Roman soldier lived inside that changing world. He still marched under orders. He still guarded frontiers. He still trained, repaired walls, escorted supplies, and stood watch in cold towers. He still knew the weight of shield, spear, sword, helmet, and pack. But around him, the empire's old confidence was fading. There were more emergencies, more rival claimants, more pressure on the borders, more taxes, more uncertainty, more sudden transfers from one region to another. The soldier might defeat an enemy in one place only to hear that another frontier had broken somewhere else. The empire had become too wide for peace to feel secure. In earlier centuries, Rome had often chosen when and where to expand. In later centuries, it was more often forced to respond. The army that had once carried conquest outward increasingly moved like a fire brigade, rushing from danger to danger. A Germanic group crossing a river, a Persian army threatening eastern provinces, a usurper claiming the throne, a rebellion in a province, a frontier fought under pressure, a supply route at risk, a city demanding protection. The soldier marched not always toward glory but toward repair. This changed the emotional meaning of military life. Conquest could be brutal, but it gave the soldier a sense of forward motion. Expansion promised spoils, triumphs, new lands, and the feeling that Rome was still growing. Defensive crisis felt different. It was colder. It asked men to suffer not because Rome was rising, but because Rome was trying not to fall apart. A a soldier can fight bravely for survival. But survival has a different weight than conquest. It is heavier, it contains fear. The late Roman army was not simply weak as some old stories suggest. That is too easy and unfair. Many late Roman soldiers were brave, skilled, adaptable, and experienced. They served in a world more complicated than the one their ancestors had known. Their enemies were not foolish. Their frontiers were long. Their politics were unstable, their supplies were expensive, their commanders had to manage threats from outside and inside at the same time. The soldier did not become less human. The world around him became harder to hold. One of the great changes was the growing importance of mobile field armies and fortified frontiers. Rome could no longer rely only on a simple image of legions standing permanently along edges, waiting behind clear lines. Threats could break through, move quickly, raid deeply, and force response far from fixed camps. The empire needed troops that could move to crisis points, while also maintaining border defenses. This required flexibility, but flexibility also created strain. Move troops from one place to save another, and the place left behind becomes nervous. Every decision had a cost. A commander who reinforced the east might weaken the north. A ruler who pulled frontier troops to fight a rival might invite invasion. A general who won a civil war might leave provinces exposed. The soldier felt these choices in his body. He packed, he marched, he left one fort for another. He arrived too late or just in time. He stood on walls that should have had more men. He watched roads that should have been safer. He heard rumors that another army had been defeated, another emperor killed, another city threatened. The map changed above him, his feet paid below. Civil war was especially destructive because it wasted Roman strength against itself. Whenever Roman soldiers fought Roman soldiers, the empire lost more than men. It lost time, trust, equipment, money, and the security of frontiers. An army that should have guarded the Danube might be drawn into a struggle for the throne. Troops that should have watched Persia might be pulled westward. Commanders who should have studied enemies beyond the frontier studied rivals within the empire. The soldier might not choose this, but he had to live it. Imagine him on the march during such a war. The standards are Roman, the commands are familiar. The camp is built in the old way. The officers speak of loyalty, legitimacy, betrayal, and duty. Yet everyone knows the enemy may be another army like their own. Men across the field may have served on the same frontier, worshipped the same gods or later the same Christian god, taken similar oaths, carried similar scars, feared similar punishments, and hoped for similar pay. Civil war turns the soldier's discipline into tragedy. He is trained to obey, but obedience now serves division. After enough civil wars, even victory becomes less reassuring. One claimant wins, another dies, troops are rewarded, punishments are carried out, and the empire claims order has returned. But the memory remains. Soldiers learn that emperors are not untouchable. They learn that armies can make rulers. They learn that loyalty may be rewarded if placed on the winning side and punished if placed on the losing side. They learn that politics is dangerous but unavoidable. The army becomes a road to power. And once the army becomes a road to power, ambitious men will always look toward it. This was not the fault of the ordinary soldier alone. He lived inside systems created by emperors, generals, administrators, and centuries of military dependence. But once soldiers realized their collective strength, imperial politics could never fully ignore them. Pay, donatives, honors, and promises were not mere generosity. They were tools of survival for rulers who needed the army's loyalty. The soldier became necessary, and because he was necessary, he became expensive. The empire needed taxes to support the army. Taxes burdened civilians. Burdened civilians sometimes resented the state. Resentment created instability. Instability required soldiers. Soldiers required more taxes. This cycle did not explain everything, but it was part of the pressure. The army protected the empire, but maintaining it could exhaust the society that depended on it. The soldier might have felt this tension indirectly. He needed pay. the farmer needed relief. The tax collector needed revenue, the emperor needed soldiers, the frontier needed defense. No one's need erased the others. This is how empires become heavy, not because one problem destroys them, but because every solution creates another burden. The Roman soldiers' equipment and appearance also changed in these later centuries. The familiar early imperial image, segmented armor, large curved rectangular shield, short sword, red cloak in popular imagination, did not remain fixed forever. Late Roman soldiers often used different armor, different shields, longer swords in some contexts, spears, darts, cavalry equipment, and varied regional styles. The army adapted to new enemies and conditions. It did not simply forget how to fight, but images are powerful. Modern viewers often imagine the real Roman soldier as the earlier legionary of the High Empire. When the late soldier looks different, people mistakenly think he is less Roman. But Rome itself had always changed. The soldier of early Rome differed from the soldier of Caesar. The soldier of Caesar differed from the soldier of Hadrian. The soldier of the later empire differed again. Change was not failure by itself, it was survival. The late Roman soldier may have worn a different helmet, carried a different shield design, served in a different unit structure, spoken Latin with a provincial accent or another language at home, worshipped Christ rather than Jupiter, followed commanders from distant provinces, and still understood himself as serving Roman power. Rome had become broader than the old image of Italy. Its army reflected that breadth. By this time, Christianity had transformed the empire's spiritual world. The soldier's relationship to religion changed with it. Earlier armies had honored traditional Roman gods, the emperor's divine associations, unit standards, local deities, and many forms of ritual. Later soldiers increasingly served under Christian emperors, saw Christian symbols, heard Christian language of divine favor, and fought in a world where the cross and imperial power had become intertwined. This did not make war gentle. Christian emperors still needed armies. Christian soldiers still killed and died. Christian symbols could bless campaigns just as older rituals once had, but the meaning of service changed. A soldier might now imagine Rome not only as a civic and imperial order, but as a Christian empire protected by God. Enemies could be described in new moral and religious language. Victory and defeat could be interpreted through divine favor, sin, punishment, or providence. The old military discipline remained, but the spiritual clothing around it shifted. The army had always been sacred in some sense. Now its sacred language changed. For the ordinary soldier, this may have meant prayers before battle, new festivals, chaplains or clergy near military life in some contexts, Christian burial practices, crosses on standards or equipment, and a different understanding of death and duty. But we should not imagine every soldier as deeply theological. Many were practical men. They wanted food, pay, survival, comradeship, and a clear order. Religion shaped the world around them, but hunger still mattered. A soldier's spirituality often lives close to his fear. When danger approaches, even practical men become aware of powers beyond themselves. The later Roman soldier also lived among peoples Rome had once called barbarian, but now often recruited, settled, allied with, or depended upon. This word barbarian is dangerous because it carries Roman judgment. Many of these peoples had complex societies, ladders, laws, warrior traditions, families, economies, and political goals. They were not simply wild crowds pressing against civilization. They were neighbors, enemies, allies, migrants, soldiers, traders, and sometimes victims of larger movements beyond Rome's sight. Some entered Roman service as federate troops. Some sought land inside the empire. Some fled other powers. Some negotiated with Rome. Some fought Rome. Some did all of these across different generations. For the Roman soldier, this made identity complicated. He might serve beside men whose fathers had fought Rome. He might fight against groups that included former allies. He might be commanded by a general of non-Italian or mixed background. He might see Roman becoming less a matter of ancestry and more a matter of service, law, command, and political belonging. Rome had always absorbed outsiders, but now absorption came under pressure. The empire needed manpower, but admitting armed groups into Roman territory created risks if trust failed. Settled peoples could become defenders or challengers. Federate troops could save a campaign or become a political force. Roman commanders could use barbarian allies against Roman rivals. The boundaries between inside and outside became less clear. The soldier standing on a frontier may have wondered where Rome truly ended. At the river, at the fort, at the oath, at the language of command, at the pay chest, at the emperor's name, or only where men were still willing to obey. This question grew more painful as Western imperial authority weakened. Some regions became difficult to control. Local aristocrats sought protection from whichever power could provide it. Roman officials negotiated with non-Roman kings. Cities adapted to new rulers while preserving Roman habits. Soldiers found themselves serving in a world where the old chain of command was no longer always clear or reliable. For the common soldier, the collapse of central power might feel less like a dramatic fall and more like uncertainty spreading through everyday things. Orders arrive late, pay becomes irregular, supply wagons fail to come. A fort is told to hold but receives no reinforcements. A commander changes allegiance. A local population stops trusting imperial promises. A road once safe becomes dangerous. A unit that once knew its place now waits for instructions from a distant authority that may no longer be able to answer. This is how a soldier experiences decline, not as a chapter title, as confusion. The famous date often associated with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, 476, would not have felt to every soldier like the end of the world. By then, much had already changed. Roman power in the West had been transformed, fragmented, negotiated, and weakened for generations. Some Roman soldiers continued under new rulers. Some military structures survived in altered forms. Some men who thought of themselves as Roman-served kings who used Roman titles, Roman administrators, Roman law, and Roman symbols. The empire did not simply vanish. It changed hands, shapes, and meanings, but something had ended. The old Western imperial system that had once commanded armies from Britain to North Africa, from Spain to the Danube, no longer held together under a single Western emperor. The soldier of the West no longer stood inside the same imperial certainty that had shaped the high Roman world. The eagle's shadow had thinned. This ending is sad not because Rome was innocent. Rome had conquered, enslaved, taxed, punished, and destroyed. Its armies had caused immense suffering, but the end is still sad because human beings had built their lives inside its order. Soldiers had given youth to it. Veterans had settled under its promises. Families had grown around its forts. Roads, towns, laws, languages, and memories had formed beneath its protection and pressure. When such a world changes, ordinary people feel the ground move beneath them. The soldier who once carried Rome may have found himself carrying only fragments, a shield with old symbols, a habit of discipline, a memory of a unit, a loyalty to a commander rather than an emperor, a language of command that still sounded Roman, a road built by earlier legions, a fort whose walls needed repair. A grave marker of a comrade from a world that no longer existed in the same way. This is where the Roman soldier becomes a haunting figure. At the beginning of the story, he leaves a farm to defend a city. At the height of the story, he carries an empire across the world. At the end of the story, he stands among the remains of a system too large, too old, too strained, and too transformed to be held together by courage alone. He is still a soldier. But the Rome he serves is changing under his feet. In the Eastern Empire, however, the story continued. The soldiers of Constantinople and the Eastern Roman world would adapt across centuries. They would fight new enemies, defend new borders, serve Christian emperors, use different tactics, and live in a Roman world that spoke more Greek than Latin but still called itself Roman. The Roman soldier did not truly disappear in the East. He transformed into the Byzantine soldier, the defender of a later Rome that would endure for nearly 1,000 years after the Western Empire's fall. That continuation matters deeply, because it reminds us that history is not a clean door closing. The Roman soldier did not end. He changed armor, changed language, changed prayers, changed enemies, changed capitals, changed forms of service, but the old pattern remained: men under discipline, carrying the burdens of a state that claimed the name of Rome. In the West, his legacy flowed into new kingdoms, military cultures, frontier societies, and memories of imperial order. Roman roads still carried armies that were no longer Roman in the old sense. Roman walls sheltered communities under new rulers. Roman veterans and local soldiers blended into the armed worlds of post-Roman Europe. The habits of Roman military organization did not vanish completely. They were inherited, imitated, misunderstood, adapted, and remembered. The soldier became history before he became legend, and legend, as always, simplified him. It remembered the shield wall more than the hunger, the eagle more than the unpaid wage, the march more than the homesickness, the victory more than the fever, the discipline more than the confusion, the empire more than the man. But if we look closely at the decline and transformation of the Roman soldier, we see something more human. We see men trying to serve an empire that kept changing the meaning of service. We see courage used in defense of order, but also in wars born from political failure. We see soldiers from many peoples becoming Roman through oath and discipline. We see the army holding frontiers, shaping emperors, absorbing outsiders, fighting civil wars, and becoming the last structure many communities could still recognize. We see the Roman soldier not as a statue, but as a man walking through history's evening. The light is lower now. The empire is older. The roads are still there, but some are unsafe. The walls still stand, but some are undermanned. The standards still rise, but their meaning is more fragile. The orders still come, but from a world less certain of itself. And somewhere a soldier adjusts his cloak against the wind, looks across a frontier he has been told to hold, and wonders whether the power behind him is as strong as the name it still carries. He may never know the answer. Most people living through decline do not know what later centuries will call it. They only know that things are harder than they were, that promises are less reliable. That danger comes more often, that old words still sound powerful but sometimes feel thinner, that the men beside them matter more than speeches from far away. And so they keep doing what soldiers have always done. They stand watch, they repair the wall, they clean the weapon. They share food, they bury the dead, they obey the next order, they march when told. The empire may be changing, but the day still has duties. This is perhaps the quietest tragedy of the Roman soldier. He helped create a world that became too heavy for him. His discipline built roads, secured provinces, defended frontiers, and carried emperors to power. But in the end, the army could not save every part of the empire from time, pressure, division, and transformation. No soldier can. A soldier can give his strength to history. He cannot command what history becomes. And as the old Western Roman order faded, the soldier's footsteps did not stop. They simply led into another world. A world of new kingdoms, later empires, altered loyalties, Christian armies, fortified cities, and memories of Rome that would never fully disappear. The Roman soldier had carried Rome for centuries. Now Rome would carry him as memory. Now Rome would carry him as memory. And memory is a strange kind of empire. It does not need roads, walls, forts, tax collectors, officers, or marching columns. It does not need a camp built at sunset or an eagle standard lifted above the dust. It survives in ruins, in stories, in carvings, in fragments of armor, in old roads still running across landscapes, in the names of battles, in the shape of military words that passed into later languages, and in the quiet image of a soldier standing beneath the weight of a world larger than himself. The Roman soldier disappeared from the living earth long ago, but he did not vanish. He became one of the most enduring figures of history. We still recognize him almost instantly. The helmet, the shield, the short sword, the red cloak in popular imagination, the eagle standard, the line of men marching through dust. Even people who know little about Roman history often know the Roman soldier. He stands beside the gladiator, the emperor, the senator, and the marble ruin as one of the great images through which Rome still speaks. But the image is simpler than the life. The image gives us strength. The life gives us burden. The image shows the soldier in formation, clean and purposeful, facing the future with discipline. The life shows him tired, hungry, frightened, proud, bored, wounded, obedient, resentful, loyal, lonely, and human. The image shows Rome's military power. The life shows the cost of carrying it. To remember the Roman soldier honestly, we must hold both together. He was not only a machine of conquest, he was not only a victim of command. He was not only a heroic defender of civilization. He was not only an instrument of imperial violence. He was all of these things at different times, in different places, under different commanders, inside different centuries of Roman history. A soldier on a muddy frontier road in Britain did not live the same life as a soldier marching under Caesar in Gaul. A recruit in the early Republic did not understand service the same way as a late Roman soldier guarding a threatened border under a Christian emperor. An auxiliary cavalryman from a provincial people did not carry exactly the same identity as an Italian veteran settled in a colony. A centurion with years of command did not see the army as a frightened new recruit saw it. The phrase Roman soldier gathers many lives into one sound. History often does this. It gives us a single name for a multitude of human beings. Legionary, veteran, auxiliary, centurion, recruit, standard-bearer, engineer, guard, scout, cavalryman. These words are useful, but they also hide faces. Behind every title was a body moving through time, a man born into a village, a man leaving home, a man learning commands. A man carrying too much weight, a man standing watch while others slept, a man laughing with comrades beside a fire, a man staring at a letter in a language scratched onto a tablet, a man burying another man far from home, a man returning after 20 years and finding that the place he remembered had changed or that he had changed too much to belong to it easily. This is the human legacy beneath the military one. Rome's army left visible marks across the world. Roads crossed provinces. Fort walls shaped landscapes. Camps became towns. Veteran colonies carried Roman habits into new regions. Inscriptions recorded units, officers, gods, emperors, victories, dedications, and grave. Military equipment from helmets to sandals to weapons survives in fragments. Borders once guarded by soldiers still attract visitors who stand in wind and imagine the men who watch the horizon. The soldier made Rome visible in stone, earth, and memory. Where the army marched, roads often followed. Where the army camped, settlements could grow. Where soldiers served, cultures mixed. Where veterans settled, Roman life took root. The empire's deepest presence was not always in the capital. It was often in the repeated daily presence of soldiers far from Rome, making imperial authority ordinary. A child born near a frontier fort might grow up hearing soldiers' voices before ever seeing Rome. To that child, Rome might not be marble temples or senatorial speeches. Rome might be a gate, a road, a uniform, a coin, a market day near the fort, the sound of drills, the sight of men marching in formation, or the fear of punishment if local tensions rose. The soldier was Rome's face at the edge. That face could bring order, it could bring fear, it could bring work, it could bring trade, it could bring violence, it could bring opportunity, it could bring loss. Empires are rarely felt as one thing by everyone. The Roman soldier's legacy therefore depends on where one stands. From the Roman point of view, he protected roads, defended borders, built camps, spread order, and held the world together. From the conquered point of view, he could be the man who arrived with fire, taxes, chains, orders, and the destruction of older freedoms. From the soldier's own point of view, he may have been neither symbol nor villain, but a man doing what service required, hoping to survive long enough to receive what had been promised. History becomes more honest when it allows all these truths to remain in the same room. The Roman soldier carried civilization and violence in the same hands. With one hand he could build a road, with the other he could hold a sword. With one day's labor he could raise a fort that protected a province. With another day's order he could help destroy a town. The same discipline served both. That is why his legacy is powerful but not simple. We may admire Roman organization, endurance, engineering, and military skill, but admiration should not erase the suffering that followed Roman expansion. We may recognize that Roman soldiers helped create a connected Mediterranean world of roads, cities, trade, law, language, and administration. But we should also recognize that this world was built through conquest, coercion, and the constant presence of armed men. The soldier did not invent the empire's ambitions, but he made them possible. A senator could dream of expansion. A general could design a campaign. An emperor could claim victory in inscriptions. But the soldier had to walk the distance between dream and reality. He had to turn a political decision into physical pressure. He had to make Rome arrive. This is why the Roman soldier remains one of history's clearest reminders that power is always embodied. States do not march, men march. Empires do not bleed, men bleed. Maps do not feel cold, hunger, fear, or exhaustion. Bodies do. The Roman Empire looks vast on a map, but every mile of that vastness had to be crossed by someone. Every frontier had to be watched by someone. Every fort had to be repaired by someone. Every siege ramp had to be built by someone. Every order had to pass through human effort before it became history. The Roman soldier was that effort, and because most of those soldiers are unnamed, their story has a quiet sadness. The empire they served became famous beyond anything they could have imagined, but their individual lives mostly disappeared. The emperors are remembered, the battles are remembered, the great roads and walls are remembered, the names of some legions are remembered. But the men who stood in the rain, carried the timber, guarded the gate, and lifted the shield are mostly gone. Only traces remain, a grave inscription giving a name, age, unit, and years of service. A boot sole preserved in mud, a letter asking for socks, cloaks, or lave, a dedication to a god for safety. A fort wall built by hands no one can identify, a road still straight across a landscape, a broken helmet in the earth. A carving of soldiers on a monument, their faces made into types rather than portraits. These fragments are small, but they are enough to remind us that the Roman army was not an abstract force. It was made of lives. The soldier's legacy also survives in the idea of military discipline itself. Later armies studied Rome, admired Rome, imitated Rome, and imagined Rome. The legion became a symbol of order under pressure. Roman camps, roads, formations, and command structures influenced how later people thought about military organization. Even when direct continuity was broken or exaggerated, the memory of Roman discipline remained powerful. For centuries, rulers and generals looked back at Rome and saw a model, an army that could march far, build quickly, obey commands, endure hardship, create fortified camps, hold formations. Absorb defeat and continue. The Roman soldier became an idealized figure of military seriousness, but idealization can be dangerous. It turns suffering into decoration. It forgets the blistered feet, bad food, fear before battle, cruelty of punishment, loneliness of frontier duty, and moral weight of conquest. The clean image of discipline can hide the human cost that made discipline real. This is why a sleep history story should not rush to glory. It should let the weight remain. The Roman soldier did not carry Rome lightly. He carried it in leather straps cutting into skin, in metal pressing on shoulders, in tools tied to packs, in orders that ignored fatigue, in roads that stretched too far, in nights when he had to stay awake because everyone else needed him not to fail. He carried it when he wanted to stop. He carried it when he was afraid. He carried it when the emperor's name meant less to him than the man beside him. He carried it when he fought for causes he may not have fully understood. He carried it when he survived and had to keep marching. And at the end of service, if he reached that day, he carried it into memory. The veteran is one of the most important figures in this story. A young recruit belongs to Rome's future. A veteran belongs to Rome's memory. He has seen the system from inside. He knows which parts are noble, which are cruel, which are necessary, which are foolish, and which cannot be explained to civilians. He may have pride in his service. He may also have bitterness. He may love his comrades more than he loves the empire. He may feel lost without the army that once controlled him. A veteran settlement could look peaceful from the outside. Land, family, local status, perhaps citizenship or reward. But inside the old soldier lived years that did not vanish. The sound of marching, the memory of a dead friend. The face of an officer, the cold of a frontier, the smell before battle, the strange comfort of camp routine, the fear of waiting, the pride of having endured. The army leaves an inner architecture. Even when the walls of the fort are far away, the man still carries them. Some veterans may have prospered, some may have struggled, some became respected local figures, some may have remained rough, restless, or difficult. Some told stories too often, some never told them at all. Some looked at younger men and saw a world that did not understand what Rome had asked of them. This too belongs to the legacy. The soldier's story does not end when the campaign ends. It follows him home if home is still waiting. For many, home changed. A man who joined the army young might return after long service to find that parents were dead, siblings older, children grown, land disputed, language changed by distance, and his own habits shaped by command. The village boy had become a soldier. The soldier had become a veteran. And the veteran had to become a civilian again if he could. Rome promised rewards because it knew service took years that could not be returned. No reward could truly give back youth. Land could provide future security. Money could ease old age. Honor could comfort pride, but time given to war remained given. This is a quiet truth of all military empires. They spend the youth of men to buy the stability or ambition of the state. Sometimes those men accept the bargain. Sometimes they are forced into it. Sometimes they benefit from it. Sometimes they are broken by it. Often all of these are mixed together in ways too human for simple judgment. The Roman soldier lived inside that bargain, and his memory asks us to see both sides. Without him, Rome would not have become Rome as history remembers it. The city would not have ruled so widely. Its roads would not have stretched so far. Its laws would not have traveled with such force. Its frontiers would not have been guarded. Its emperors would not have held power. Its cities would not have been connected by the same military roads, supply systems, and administrative reach. But because of him, many peoples lost freedom, land, lives, and older ways of living. Both statements are true. That is the moral weight of empire. The Roman soldier stands inside that weight, not above it. As centuries passed and the old Roman military world transformed, later people continued to imagine him. Medieval rulers inherited Roman roads and walls without fully inheriting the empire that made them. Renaissance thinkers admired Roman discipline and read ancient military writers. Modern armies looked back at Roman organization. Films, novels, paintings, documentaries, and games reshaped the legionary again and again. Sometimes he became a hero, sometimes a faceless oppressor, sometimes a symbol of order, sometimes a symbol of imperial arrogance. The real soldier remains quieter beneath these versions. He is not as clean as the heroic image, not as empty as the faceless image, not as simple as the villainous image. Not as glorious as the imperial image. He is a man under command walking through history. That image is enough. A man under command walking through history. At the beginning, he walks out from early Rome when the city is small and the fields lie close to danger. He carries the fears of a citizen community learning to survive. He stands beside neighbors. He fights for a city that is not yet an empire. Then he walks through Italy, as Rome defeats rival peoples and learns that discipline can become destiny. He becomes more organized, more tested, more shaped by war. Then he walks against Carthage, across sea and land, into disasters that nearly break Rome and victories that open the Mediterranean. Then he walks under generals whose ambition reshapes the Republic, through civil wars where Roman discipline turns against Rome itself. Then he walks under emperors stationed at distant borders, building roads, forts, walls, and camps, turning military service into the daily structure of empire. Then he walks through crisis as the empire's burdens grow heavier, as frontiers strain, as politics fractures, as outsiders become enemies, allies, and soldiers within Rome's own system. Then finally he walks into memory. The road continues, but the world changes around him. The banners change, the language changes, the prayers change, the uniforms change, the commanders change. The empire becomes kingdom, church, frontier, ruin, legend, and lesson. But the footsteps remain. If we listen quietly, the Roman soldier's story becomes less about domination and more about endurance. Not because domination disappears, but because endurance is the human thread running through it all. He endures orders, weather, distance, fear, boredom, hunger, wounds, pride, shame, and the impossible demands of a state that always wanted more road, more border, more victory, more loyalty, more years from the same body. He is asked to hold the line, again and again. But no line holds forever. That is the final truth. Rome's soldiers held many lines against enemies, rebels, rivals, deserts, rivers, mountains, forests, and time itself. Some lines held for centuries, some broke in a day, some became walls, some became roads, some became borders that shifted, weakened, and vanished. The soldier's discipline could delay change, it could shape change, it could defend against change, but it could not stop change forever. Eventually the camp empties, the road cracks, the wall loses its guards, the fort becomes a ruin, the unit name fades from living speech, the veteran dies, the empire becomes history. And yet something remains, not the empire as it was, not the army as it marched, but the memory of human effort beneath the weight of power. The Roman soldier remains because he shows us how civilizations are carried, not only by kings, laws, gods, and monuments, but by ordinary bodies trained to do difficult things for a larger order. He shows us that history is not only decisions made in palaces. It is also a man lifting his pack before dawn. A man digging earth after a long march, a man standing watch in rain, a man holding formation while fear moves through him, a man growing old with scars from places far from home. These men carried Rome, and Rome in return carried their names only rarely. But even when names are gone, the pattern of their lives can still be felt. Stand on an old Roman road in the mind and imagine the sound of marching, not loud at first, only a soft rhythm, sandals and boots against stone, leather creaking. Metal shifting, a command passing down the line, a cough, a joke, a silence, a standard moving above them, the road ahead long as it always was. Behind them a camp already fading. Before them another river, another hill, another order, another night under the open sky. They do not know that they are becoming symbols. They do not know that centuries later people will study their armor, trace their roads, visit their forts, and speak of Rome as though it were a single great thing. They only know the day's march, and perhaps that is where we should leave them, not frozen in battle, not carved in perfect stone, but moving, tired, disciplined, human, and still walking. The sun lowers over the road, dust softens in the evening light. The officer's voice grows quieter as the column slows. Somewhere ahead the camp will be marked, the ditch will be dug, the rampart will rise, fires will appear one by one, men will eat, clean their gear, speak softly, remember home, or stare into the dark. Above them the same stars that watched early Rome now watch the empire stretched across the world. For a moment the soldier sits beside his shield. He is not conquering, he is not marching, he is not standing in formation, he is only resting. A man beneath the sky, a man who has carried too much, a man whose footsteps helped shape history though history may never speak his name. And as night settles over the camp, the noise of empire fades, the standards grow still. The road disappears into darkness, the fires burn low, the soldiers sleep one by one under the guarded silence of Rome. If you wish to keep walking through history, another quiet world will be waiting in the next story. But for now, we leave the legion at rest. The shields are stacked, the helmets are lowered. The watch is set, the empire breathes in the dark, and the men who carried Rome finally close their eyes.